Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I hope you all enjoy it. I love staying up late and recording these stories. I had a lot of fun making this video, as I usually do, so I hope you all enjoy it. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 500 likes on this one. I think if everybody took just a quick second, we could definitely get there. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post videos just like this one all of the time. Also, we just passed our 10-year anniversary of Slumber Reads, which is wild. We've been doing this for a whole decade, and I plan on doing it for another as well. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. A couple weeks ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Your appointment is scheduled for 2:30 p.m., October 19th. Please arrive on time. No name, no details, just that. I figured it was a wrong number or some spam bot and ignored it. I'm not the type to book random appointments. My life's a mess of late rent and grocery runs. Not schedules. But the next day, another text. Reminder, 2:30 p.m., October 19th. Do not be late. It came at 3 a.m., lighting up my phone on the nightstand. I blocked the number. It didn't stop. The texts kept coming, every day from different numbers, burner phones maybe, or spoofed lines. Always the same message, same time. 3 a.m. I'd wake up to my phone buzzing, that cold glow cutting through the dark, and my stomach would drop. I called my provider, but they said there was nothing they could do. Numbers weren't traceable, no pattern to pin down. I stopped sleeping right, started double-checking my locks, even though I live on the 4th floor of a crappy apartment building with a broken buzzer. Paranoia, sure, but it felt like someone was watching me screw up my own head. October 19th feels almost like yesterday. The text stopped that morning, and I thought it was over. I was exhausted, strung out on coffee and nerves, but relieved. Around noon, my boss called me into work. Extra shift. Cash I couldn't say no to. I'm a line cook, and the kitchen was a blur of grease and yelling. I didn't notice the time until I glanced at the clock while scrubbing a skillet. 2:28 p.m. My chest tightened. I told myself it was nothing. Just a coincidence, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 2:30 sharp, the power cut out. The kitchen went dark. Lights, vents, everything. Dead silence. Then the sound of something heavy hitting the floor in the back room. My coworker, Javier, swore and grabbed a flashlight from under the counter. I followed him, my sneakers sticking to the tile. Heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The back room's where we keep the walk-in fridge and extra stock. Cramped, cold, no windows. The flashlight beam caught stacks of boxes. Then the fridge door cracked open. Javier muttered, "What the?" and stepped closer. That's when I saw it. Something was smeared across the door. Thick, dark, like oil, but redder, wetter. Blood maybe, but it didn't smell right. Sharp, chemical, wrong. Javier reached for the handle and I grabbed his arm. Told him to wait. He shook me off. Called me a baby and pulled it open. The fridge was empty. Not just no meat, no crates. Empty like it had been gutted, walls bare and gleaming. Too clean. In the center on the floor was a folded piece of paper. My name was written on it in block letters. Javier laughed, nervous, and said, "Someone's messing with you, man." I didn't touch it. I couldn't. My legs felt like they were sinking into the floor and every breath tasted sour. He picked it up, unfolded it, and his face changed. Went slack, pale. like he'd forgotten how to blink. He dropped it and bolted, didn't say a word, just ran. I should have left too, but I looked. It was a photo of me taken from above, like a security camera shot, standing in my kitchen at home. I was holding a knife staring at the counter, but I don't remember it. I don't own a knife like that. Long, serrated, stained. Written across the bottom in the same block letters. You were late. The power kicked back on then, and the fridge was normal again. Stocked, cluttered, no blood, no paper. I stumbled out, told my boss I was sick, and left. Javier didn't come back either. His phone's off and no one's seen him. I got home, checked every corner, found nothing. But my kitchen counter had a fresh scratch, deep like something sharp had dragged across it. I haven't slept. I keep hearing footsteps above my apartment, slow and deliberate, even though I'm on the top floor. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. again. Rescheduled, April 6th, 2:30 p.m. Be on time. That's today. It's 1:45 p.m. now. I'm sitting here typing this because I don't know what else to do. I can hear someone moving upstairs again, pacing, stopping right over my head. My hands are cold and my stomach's a knot. I don't know what's coming at 2:30, but I know I can't run from it. If I don't post again, check the news. Look for me. Please. Sometimes I think about a photo I saw when I was a kid. A photo that used to terrify me. I can't quite remember what was in it anymore. But the fear it stirred in me was so real, so sharp that even now, years later, a flicker of unease returns whenever I try to recall it. It's strange how something you can't even picture can still haunt you. One rainy afternoon I visited my Uncle Ryan, who still lived alone at 42 in the same house he'd grown up in. The place had a quiet, museum-like stillness to it, full of untouched memories. I remembered hearing from our family about how his teenage girlfriend, Elise, had drowned during a summer trip when they were just 17. He never really dated anyone seriously after that. As we sat in his living room, sipping tea under the soft hum of a table lamp, I caught sight of an old photo album on the shelf. A chill passed through me, sudden and inexplicable. Something about the album tugged at a deep, buried fear, like the feeling I got when I try to remember that photo from my childhood. It's not my uncle's girlfriend that was in the creepy photo, wasn't it? I mean, his girlfriend looked sweet and charming. As we finished our tea, Uncle stood up and carefully cut a tiny slice of the lemon cake we were eating. He placed it gently on a small floral plate, then opened the fridge and set it on the top shelf, right beside an old glass jar with dried roses inside. I watched, puzzled. Saving some for later? I asked lightly. Uncle smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. It's for Elise, he said softly. She always loved lemon cake. I like to leave her a little something, just in case she visits. His voice held no irony, just quiet conviction. I felt a strange tightness in my chest, and that old forgotten fear stirred again, like something was just out of sight, was beginning to step closer. I stood and stretched. Mind if I look around? I haven't seen the house for years, I said, forcing a casual tone. Uncle nodded, gesturing vaguely down the hallway. Of course, go ahead. I stepped into one of the newly painted rooms, a quiet, softly lit space with pale green walls and a fresh scent from the polished floorboards. I wandered toward the window. As I looked out, my breath caught in my throat. Someone quickly showed up in front of me from outside the window. Its head tilted slightly and it was smiling, but there was something wrong with the smile. It was too wide, too fixed, like it didn't belong to a living person. I blinked, and in that split second, the figure was gone. I backed away from the window quickly, heart thudding. What makes it more disturbing was the fact that I'm in the second floor. I hurried back to the living room, trying to keep my voice steady. Uncle, I just remembered. I've got to head out. I totally lost track of time. Uncle looked up from his chair, surprised and a little hurt. Already? You just got here. Stay for dinner, at least. I was going to make Elise's favorite stew. That name again. My skin prickled. Next time, I promise, I said, grabbing my bag and slipping on my coat with shaky hands. A week passed and the image of the smiling figure refused to leave my mind. Sleep came in fits, my dreams flickering with half-formed faces and waterlogged whispers. Eventually I gave in to the pull of the past and called my mom one quiet evening. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Do you remember that old maroon suitcase? The one that had Uncle Ryan's photos and sketches? There was a pause on the other end. That thing? It's in the attic, I think. Why? I just want to look at something. My mom sighed, a soft rustle of worry in her voice. That suitcase contains a lot of valuable stuff to your uncle. Just handle it with care. I promised her I'll be careful with it. It was time to face whatever had been waiting in the dark corners of my memory. The attic smelled of dust and old wood, thick with the weight of forgotten years. I found the maroon suitcase tucked behind a stack of broken displays, dusty chest, and yellowed, ripped magazines. My hands trembled slightly as I unlatched it, the metal clicks echoing in the stillness. Inside, the familiar scent of paper and charcoal greeted me. I sifted through them softly, cautiously, until my fingers paused on a worn piece of cardstock tucked between 2 pages of a sketch pad. There it was. The photo. At first glance it looked innocent, an old black and white snapshot of my uncle's backyard taken from a window. But as I adjusted my eyes, I saw it. In the far corner of the image, half concealed in the shadows near the fence, was the same smiling woman I saw from the guest room window. Elise. The grotesque, rotting, drowned face of Elise. My breath caught, but I didn't look away. I turned the page in the sketchbook next to it, and my heart thudded loud in my chest. It was one of Uncle's drawings. Rough, frantic lines in heavy pencil. A woman with a drowned, sunken face. But what made me gasp was her neck. It's long and impossibly stretched, reaching up along the side of a house. Her face peeking through the second-story window, looking like a pale snake dipped in black mud. I suddenly understood. The fear I carried since childhood wasn't just from the photo. It was from seeing that face once before, through the very same window when I was just a little girl. Elise had been watching over us. I think something most people can relate to is the odd paranoia of sleeping at a grandparent's house in the middle of nowhere. The nights are so quiet and eerie. It always feels like something is watching you just outside of your field of vision, but close enough for you to see movement in the peripheral. When I was a kid, I used to frequent my grandparents' house on a large wooden estate in some rural mountains. There were always stories that a man had died in that house, but who knows if that's even true. These days, I don't remember much about those nights, but I do remember always seeing some being outside the door to the room I would sleep in. It would sit on the roof and look in from the top of the door frame. It would just sit there and watch. It would be gone by sunrise, but there would always be mysterious puddles of liquid where it hung. For the longest time, I convinced myself it was just childish superstitions. Nothing more than my younger brain making me see things. Recently, however, I got the chance to revisit the old house, and those memories of that thing just pried at my mind. My grandparents both died years ago, and their house was simply left to rot away. I was passing through that area and decided to stop in the little town nearby to relive some childhood memories. I wish I just kept driving. I used to head into the town with my grandparents just to look around, grab something to eat from the local diner at the corner. There wasn't much to do, but it was quaint and I enjoyed it. Driving through the town now, though, everything just seemed so off. There was a strange whistle as the cold wind blew through the town, lifting up the snow on the sidewalk. The old diner had closed down and was left abandoned on the corner. There weren't many people walking around the main road, which was odd considering that place used to be quite busy this time of day. But it had been years since I visited. Maybe people just moved away. I don't exactly blame them. Like I said, the town was quaint and generally felt disconnected from the world. Some found it peaceful, others lonely. I took one of the back roads leading towards the house. The sun was setting at this point. The dense forest on either side of the road was getting darker and colder by the minute. On the side of the road was a ripped open deer. It had been freshly killed. I guess nature never sleeps. It was about here I got a strange chill through my entire body. It felt like tons of tiny pinpricks were stabbing me across the entire body. I started to see eyes in the trees and heard whispers in the wind. I started shaking, despite the fact the inside of my car wasn't even cold. I considered turning around, which in retrospect was what I should have done, but I felt something pulling me back to that house. I pulled into the long, winding driveway and slowly made my way up to the front of the house. It was in shambles. Parts of the roof had fallen in, some of the windows seemed broken into. The door was ripped off its hinges in an unnatural way. What the hell? I thought. Had someone robbed this place at some point? I stepped out of my car, and the frost whipped my skin. The cold dark felt ever encroaching. I could barely see 25 feet in front of me, the only source of light being my dim car headlights. Those went out and I was left in a freezing blackness that consumed me. I heard voices in the trees all around me, beckoning me toward them. I switched on my flashlight and started to walk up to the house. The porch creaked with every step. There were tons of holes in it, and familiar claw marks were all over it and the broken door. My heart stopped. Was there some animal inside? Whatever it was, it had to be long dead by now. The house was silent except for my paranoid breathing. I took my time looking around. After all, there were plenty of memories to be reminisced on. I would cook with my grandma in the kitchen. I was never too good at it, but I was young and nothing really mattered yet. My grandpa would show me his hunting rifles in his trophy room. Stuffed deer heads lined the walls. Back then, they were all marks of a great huntsman. Now, they just felt creepy. Their dead, beady eyes staring into me. A noise from the kitchen. The hairs on my neck stood up. Something was inside the house with me. I picked up one of the old guns and prayed to God it still worked. I slowly peeked around the corner of the doorway, staring into the abyss of the darkened kitchen. I couldn't see much, but it was impossible to discern actual movement from anxious mind tricks. I closed the door and waited in the trophy room a bit. Footsteps. I put my ear up to the door. They were right outside it. My heart dropped and I could feel it pounding in my throat. A sweat broke out on my forehead. They came up to the door, and then slowly trailed off into the distance. I waited a good 15 minutes just listening to the silence to make sure the coast was clear. Someone or something was definitely inside with me. I finally gathered up the courage to peek through the crack in the door. Nothing, at least as far as I could tell. I slowly creeped out into the main room, shotgun pointed out directly in front of me. At this point, my heart was pounding inhumanly fast. My entire body was shaking, due to the cold or the fear, I wasn't sure. I should have left then. but I had to check one last thing before I did. Either way, it seemed like whatever was inside had left. I couldn't hear any noises anywhere in the house. I came to the stairs leading up to the second floor. I had to look in the room I used to sleep in one last time, just for nostalgia's sake. I still had the shotgun in my hands, although I relaxed a little now. There were only 3 rooms on the second floor: my grandparents' bedroom, my guest bedroom where I stayed, and the upstairs bathroom. I didn't care much to look anywhere else but the guest room. I had spent so many nights there. The room had been ingrained into memory. As I began to step towards it, I heard another step above me, in the attic. My heart started beating again. My skin was littered with goosebumps. I had to check. I pulled down the old ladder and slowly made my way up it. I stared into the darkness of the attic. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face, but I could hear something. Not 30 feet from me, something was eating something. I heard bones crunching and flesh being torn. I turned on the flashlight and pointed it towards the sound. There, now staring directly at me, was whatever creature I used to see those late nights when I was a kid. It was completely real and physical. It was a bony humanoid creature. Its eyes were a piercing white, its skin a disgusting pale, and its teeth rotting and razor sharp. Blood dripped from its mouth, and I saw it was eating a dead deer corpse. It let out a nauseating screech that caused me to fall down from the ladder. If it hadn't been for how panicked I was, it might have got me. I screamed and scrambled back to my feet. I ran and tried to shoot the thing. The gun didn't even work. I ran to the only place I could think to stay, the guest room. I ran inside, the door fallen off its hinges. I got a second to catch my breath, and realized I had no idea where that thing was. My mind was racing, my body was violently shaking. I tried to think of where it could have gone. Then I remembered how it used to sit on the ceiling. I peeked up at the ceiling, and sure enough, it sat. Claws sank into the roof, just waiting. It wasn't able to come into the room. I tried to possibly think why, but I couldn't come up with anything at the moment. I couldn't walk outside the room. I couldn't jump out the window, lest I wanted to risk an injury from the second floor. Plus, that thing would probably run out after me. I looked around for something to use. There was nothing there. I opened the closet and I screamed as a corpse fell out from it. It was rotten and old, and I vomited on the spot. This was a person who had died here years ago, probably because of the creature. And this was why, I assumed, the creature couldn't climb into the room. His corpse held a small vial of an unknown substance. It looked like some kind of powder or incense. Some strange concoction that kept that thing away. It made sense to me now why that creature never entered all those years ago. That man's body was always in the closet. I just never bothered to look inside. My shaky hand picked up the vial and sprinkled some out into the hole. The creature screeched again, causing me a pounding headache. This stuff kept it out, and that's all I needed to know. I've now been sitting in this room for 2 hours. That thing hasn't left. No matter how much of the incense I sprinkle out into the hole, the dead corpse is still rotting next to me, and I'm still freezing in the darkness. I don't know what to do. I'm going to have to leave eventually, but I don't want to become the thing that's the source of the liquid dripping from the ceiling. I'm in need of some advice, but I don't even know what kind of help I should be after. It started about 3 weeks ago. I got a call from my mom on a cold Monday. We talk often enough, and a phone call from her isn't a strange occurrence at all. The only real strange part about it was that it was while I was on the clock at my job. I'm a nurse, so she usually would only call if something was important. I picked up the phone, fully expecting to hear that someone had died, only to be greeted by her familiar, gentle voice. She was casual, sweet, just asking about my day. Don't get me wrong, I love my mom, and I like talking to her, but I was at work and it was a very busy day. I tried to politely excuse myself and get back to what I was doing. Before I could hang up, she said something that caught me off guard. "I'm glad you're sleeping better. You looked so peaceful." I was caught a bit off guard by this. You see, I'm in my 20s and I've lived alone for almost 7 years now. What's more, my mom lives about 200 miles away from me. I didn't think much of it at the time, but as the day went on, for some reason, it bothered me more and more. After my shift, I called her again, and again she began a casual, cheery conversation with me. What she said earlier was burning into my brain at this point, so I asked her what she meant by that. Without missing a beat and in the same happy tone, she told me, "Well, you've been tossing and turning. I was just happy to see you sleeping peacefully last night." I didn't know what to say. I asked her if she was making a joke. Her response sounded just as confused as I was. She told me she had tucked me in last night. I didn't want to start an argument. My mother is not young, and there is a history of degenerative brain disease in some of our family. I was worried that maybe she was sick. I changed the topic again to her day, and finished what turned into a relatively pleasant conversation. Given the earlier confusion, I texted my brother immediately. He lives in the same town as my mom and told him to check on her. Ever since then, I feel like I've been losing my mind. At first I began to notice the smallest things. Tiny instances that aren't as they should be. That day when I got home, for example, the chair at the head of my dining room table was pulled out too far. I could have sworn I tucked it in, but reason tells me I must have forgotten. My bed was made when I knew for a fact I didn't make it. It was folded and tucked under the mattress, the same way my mom did it when I was little. I called my brother. I had no idea what was going on. Maybe my mom had come to visit and was pranking me. It was unlike her, but what else could this be? He told me that he had just had tea with her. It's been getting worse and worse. At night, I can hear footsteps, but when I get up to look for their source, they vanish, leaving me questioning if I really heard anything at all. A few nights ago, I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of humming. It was faint, barely audible, but I recognized the melody instantly. It was the lullaby my mom used to sing to me when I was little. The one she hummed when I had nightmares. I froze. It was coming from my bedroom doorway. I couldn't bring myself to look. I just shut my eyes and lay there, stiff under the covers, trying not to breathe too loudly. Eventually the sound faded. When I finally worked up the nerve to turn on the light, the room was empty, but the closet door, which I always leave open, was shut. I've been calling her during the day, but it's no use. She either denies any of it, or simply speaks as if nothing was wrong. More often than not, she goes off on tangents that frustrate me to no end. I even recorded our last conversation, thinking maybe I could catch something, some slip, some change in her voice that would make sense of this. But when I played it back, the audio was crystal clear. Too clear. There was no background noise at all. No ambient hum, no shuffling, no clink of her spoon in her teacup like there always is. Just her voice, bright and cheerful, telling me she was proud of me, that I looked so calm now. I hadn't told her I was recording, and yet, right before the call ended, she said, "You should stop doing that. It's not polite." I've grown paranoid. I don't sleep in my bed anymore. I've taken to sleeping on the couch instead, but without fail I wake up in my bed, neatly tucked under the covers. Last night I stayed awake as long as I could. I thought if I could catch it in the act, I could prove to myself that this wasn't just in my head. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up, and I remember the hand that pulled the blanket over me. It wasn't hers. It was colder, thinner. The fingers were too long, and they didn't tremble the way hers used to. When it touched my forehead, there was no warmth, just a kind of pressure, like it was memorizing me. I kept my eyes shut. I don't know why. I think I thought if I looked at it, it would look back, but it knew I wasn't asleep. I can't explain it, but I could feel that it knew. It leaned closer. I could feel it, the weight of it pressing into the mattress beside me, slow and deliberate. The sound it made was low and wet, like thick saliva pulling apart in strands. Something dragged across my cheek. Not fingers this time. Something softer, frayed at the edges. Hair, maybe. But it smelled like meat left too long in the sun. Then it spoke. You don't cry anymore. Not like before. Its voice was trying to be hers, but it wasn't right. The words came out broken, halting and slow, like someone reading phonetics off a cue card. And underneath it, something else breathed. Something heavier, labored, excited. I opened my eyes. There was nothing there. But the blankets were rising and falling beside me like someone invisible was still lying there, mimicking my breath. The indentation in the mattress was fresh, deep, and smeared along the pillow next to mine was a thick, dark streak, brown-red and rotting at the edges, like old blood mixed with dirt. When I looked back at the mirror, there was something sitting on the edge of the mattress. At first, I thought it was her. The hair was the same length, same part down the middle, but it was patchy, thin and coarse in some places, clumped like wet straw in others. Tufts were missing altogether, exposing skin that looked stitched, like burlap pulled too tight over something that wasn't a skull. It tilted its head again. The motion was jerky, like a puppet on tangled strings. Then slowly it began to turn. I didn't want to see. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, but I couldn't. The face that met mine in the mirror was trying to be my mother. It had her eyes, at least. It had eyes where hers used to be, but they were cloudy, too wide, like glass marbles pressed into soft clay. The nose was flat, crushed like something broken and reset wrong. The mouth was the worst part. It stretched too far, like it had been cut at the corners. The lips were split and scabbed, peeled back in a permanent smile that showed rows of tiny baby-like teeth. Dozens of them. Too white, too clean. It was brushing its hand across the pillow, slow and tender. And then it looked up, not at the bed, at the mirror, at me. And it smiled. I backed away from the mirror, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. I didn't want to see it anymore. I didn't want it to see me. But I couldn't look away. The thing on the bed tilted its head slowly like it was curious. Then it raised one long shaking arm and waved. I turned. Nothing was there. When I looked back at the mirror, it was gone. The bed was empty again, just rumpled blankets and silence. I stood there for a long time, barely breathing, too afraid to move. And then my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was soft, calm. "Don't be scared, sweetheart," she said. "We just miss you." He was only gone for 2 days. Said he needed to clear his head, so he packed light and headed up into the Uintas with his usual gear. No big deal. He's done it before, but this time, when he came back, something was off. It started with how he walked in. No announcement, no "I'm back," just opened the door, set his pack down, and stood in the kitchen like he forgot what it was for. I was at the table mid-bite. He looked at me and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good trip?" I asked. He nodded, still smiling. That smile didn't drop once the whole night. Not when he told me about the mountain lion tracks near his campsite. Not when I noticed he was wearing my sweatshirt. The one he hates. Not even when I asked what trail he took and he said North Ridge. There is no North Ridge. Not here. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about how he moved felt wrong. Too smooth. Too studied. At one point I got up to check the locks and caught a glimpse of him in the hallway mirror. He was just standing in the dark staring at it. Not at his reflection, at the space beside it. The next morning I found a dead bird on the porch. Not torn apart, just laid out neatly. Like a gift. He said he didn't put it there. Then he asked if I remembered when our mom died. The thing is, she's still alive. I waited until he went out back. He said he wanted to feel the sun, but just stood in the middle of the yard, arms hanging loosely at his sides, face tilted upward like he was trying to remember what warmth felt like. That gave me maybe 10 minutes. I went straight for his pack. It looked normal at first. His knife, half-used water bladder, trail snacks he didn't touch, but when I unzipped the bottom pouch, I found something he would have never brought home. A lock of hair, tied with red thread. Dry, brittle, not his color, not mine. It looked old, like it had been buried in salt or ash. Underneath it was a scrap of parchment, something drawn in charcoal, rough circles layered with jagged lines, stick figures warped around a central shape. I didn't recognize the symbol, but the longer I stared, the more I felt like I should. When I turned it over, a single word was scrawled in the corner in tiny, frantic handwriting. Return. I barely had time to zip the pack shut before I heard the back door open. He stepped inside, eyes still fixed on the ceiling like something might be living just above it. "You been in my bag?" he asked calmly. I lied, said no. He smiled. That smile. It stayed frozen while he poured himself a glass of water, gulped it down too fast, then poured another. His throat made no sound as he swallowed. Later that night, I woke up to him humming. A song we used to sing when we were little. Only half the melody was wrong. Notes bent in places they shouldn't bend. The words didn't rhyme anymore. And when I peeked down the hallway, I saw him standing at my bedroom door, back turned, not moving, just listening. He didn't say anything when I asked what he was doing. He just walked away. In the morning, he was already at the kitchen table when I got up. No coffee, just sitting. He looked at me with that too wide smile and said, "Why'd you lie, little brother?" He asked why I lied. I didn't answer. I just stood there, heartbeat hammering behind my ribs, wondering how long he'd known. If he saw me touch the pack, if he'd ever really turned his back at all. He didn't press the question, just smiled and went back to staring at the table. Later, he left again. No word, no jacket, just walked out into the tree line and vanished like he'd always belonged there. This time I didn't check the pack. I waited, and after midnight he came back. His hands were covered in dirt, shirt torn, no blood, just wrong. Like it wasn't made for his body anymore, like his limbs had started to stretch beneath the seams. He didn't say anything, just walked past me and went straight to the basement. That's when I heard it. knocking. But not from the door, from inside the pack. Slow, wet, rhythmic, like knuckles dragging against plastic. I opened it. The first thing I saw was the hair again, matted now, damp with something dark. Beneath it, something wrapped in a tattered gray cloth. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I reached in and pulled it free. It was a jar sealed with wax and twine. Inside was a mouth. Not a full face, just a mouth, twisted in a silent scream. Gums torn back, lips stitched closed with animal sinew. But it was breathing. The glass fogged up every few seconds. It was trying to speak. Then I realized something. It looked like mine. I dropped it. The jar didn't break. It just rolled to the edge of the floor and sat there vibrating softly. Then from the basement, his voice called up. Except it wasn't really his. It was mine. Low, hollow, almost like he was trying it on for the first time. "Why'd you go through my things, little brother?" I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the jar. It was smiling now. Back in my early 20s, I worked at a small radio station as the nighttime radio host. The station itself was in a small town about an hour away from Las Vegas. KRT3 87.4 FM was our station name. Not particularly noteworthy or catchy sounding, but our signal only really served the small town surrounding one side of Vegas, so it didn't need to stand out. Despite that fact, we had a small yet dedicated listener base and played mostly old country songs. Some mornings when I'd go to the local diner for breakfast after my shift, I'd talk with some of the old-timers that liked to tune into my evening broadcast. They'd usually give me music suggestions, or things to talk about for my next show. Needless to say, it was a great gig, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The pay was okay, but it honestly wasn't a lot of work, and it got me by while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. With that being said, there was one incident at the station that made me quit for good, and to this day I still have zero idea as to what actually happened that night. For context, our station was a small brick building about a 30-minute drive outside of a very small town. Altogether, the total population had to have been somewhere around 600 people, so the community was very tight-knit. We were situated just off the main highway, and it wasn't unusual to see a few cars pass each night, but you never really saw any people whatsoever. The land across from the station was bare desert for miles and miles, and the same could be said for the surrounding land as well, with the exclusion of a few small mountain/foothill ranges and a Native American reservation approximately 80 miles north of the station. Now with the scene set, let me share with you one of the most horrifying nights I've had in my life. It was late August, probably around 6 p.m. I was an hour into my shift and my coworker, who was the daytime host, had stayed a bit later with me so we could do a segment/debate about the local mayoral election coming up. Super boring stuff, but our average listener base consisted of old farmers and ranchers who ate up local politics. We finished up and segued into the first music block I had carved out for the night, allowing my coworker to gather his things and get ready to go home. "Alright, I've got my keys, got my bag, should be everything," my coworker mumbled to himself. "Oh, and are you still okay to come in an hour and a half earlier tomorrow to cover me? I'm sorry to do it to you, but my dog cannot miss her appointment at the vet. She's getting old, you know." I never was able to sleep well anyways. and the little bit of overtime would help with some bills. So I had readily agreed. Yeah, man, of course. Don't worry about it. I'll be here for 3:30 p.m. sharp. Just don't forget, you owe me one. I jokingly jabbed back at him. Yes, yes, I know, I won't forget. Anyways, I gotta run. See you tomorrow, dude. My coworker replied back as he clumsily stumbled his way out the door towards his car. With a slam of the door and a turn of the key, him and his car motored off back into town, leaving just me at the station. I had about 50 minutes left of the uninterrupted music block I started, so I decided to break out one of the books I had in my desk and then head to our small kitchen to put a pot of coffee on. I managed to get about 3 chapters of Death is a Lonely Business and 2 cups of coffee down before it was time to interject with my weather update for the day. It's another lovely evening here in town name, with temperatures sitting around 91 degrees Fahrenheit as the sun is setting. Nothing but clear skies on the radar, so get out there and do some stargazing tonight. Anyways, coming up next we have another solid hour of nothing but solid gold country hits. Starting off with a great one from Hank Williams. This one's for you, Ray. Ray was one of the old-timers I talked to at the diner often. He had requested a certain album that morning, so of course I had to dig through all our vinyls to see if we had it. Which we did. As I dropped the needle onto the groove, I was startled by a sharp succession of knocks at the station door. It caught me off guard as nobody ever really shows up at the station, unless it's someone in dire need of help. Or maybe my coworker turning around because he forgot something. I recalled an incident the year prior where a stranded motorist had shown up at the station at night seeking help, and thought maybe this was the case again. I got up as my next block of music started, and went to peer through the peephole of the door to see who was there. There was a guy on the other side of the door, probably in his late teens or early 20s. Slim build, average height. Possibly Native American or Latino with dark black hair, dark brown eyes, and was wearing a tan plaid shirt with a pair of dirty jeans and well-worn cowboy boots. I decided to open the door to greet him and truly caught sight of just how bad he looked. He was disheveled and looked exhausted with his eyes sunken back into his skull and beads of sweat pouring from his face. Hey man, are you alright? Do you need something? I asked him. He looked back at me for what felt like almost entirely too long before replying in a low, almost hushed voice. My car broke down. You got a phone? The station did indeed have a landline, so I brought him inside and led him to the phone. There's a directory book hanging on the wall beside the phone. Town's not too far from here, and I believe the service stations offer towing services. Why don't you just give them a call and I'll grab you some water, man. You don't look too good. I told the man as I went to the kitchen to get some water and simultaneously make a fresh pot of coffee. He nodded but didn't say a word. I returned down the hallway with a glass of water and found him sitting at my coworker's desk. His back was to me, sitting absolutely pinned straight in the chair with his arms resting on the chairs. Here's that water, man. Were you able to get a hold of the folks at the service station? I asked as I set the water down on the desk in front of him. I received no reply to my question. Instead, he kept his gaze focused out the window beside the front door. I went and sat in my chair across from him. Yet again he remained silent, but picked up the water and drank it all down in one continuous motion, before sitting the glass back down on the desk. I found his lack of any real conversation a bit strange. But then again, I had no idea how long dude had been out there exposed to the elements. It could get up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and that kind of heat can kill you if you're not prepared. I thought he's probably just severely dehydrated and beyond exhausted. How far away did your car break down? I asked. He stared at me for what felt like an uncomfortably long time, before raising his finger towards the east and saying again in a hushed tone, "About 5 miles." He looked like he had walked about 500 miles to get here, not just 5. So I was a bit confused on how he looked as disheveled as he was. Nonetheless, I wasn't here to judge. "Hey, that ain't too bad. At least it wasn't 100 miles away. Kinda lucky you were close to here. Well, just sit tight for a bit. I'm sure the tow truck will be along within the next hour or two. I've got coffee brewing right now if you want some." Again, he didn't utter a word, and just turned his head to stare out the window. The sun was starting to go down, casting a deep orange glow onto his face. I took it as a silent acknowledgement and jumped back into my reading for a bit, neither of us moving from our positions for the next 30 minutes, and nobody uttering a single word in that time. Checking my watch, I saw I had about 10 minutes before introducing the next music block, so I got up to get more coffee. The guy was still staring out the window as I passed by. I'm not even sure if he blinked once in the time we spent sitting there. He just kept his head to the side, staring out the window. Grabbing 2 mugs, I poured us both some coffee, but being the klutz I am, I managed to spill mine. I spent a few minutes cleaning everything up before heading back out to my desk with mugs in hand. My coworker's chair was empty. I sat the 1 mug I poured for the stranger down on the desk and looked around for him. Walking briefly to the hallway, I noticed the bathroom door shut and figured he was probably in there. I was a bit confused as I never heard anyone stand up and walk down the hall, but didn't really give it a second thought. I set my coffee down at my desk, dropped into my chair, and popped my headphones on just in time to interject my commentary before the next hour of music. KRT3, with yet another hour of uninterrupted music coming up. Next, starting off with a great album from the Charlie Daniels Band. But before that, I'd just like to say, even though we are heading into fall, make sure you and your vehicle are prepared to face the heat of the desert if you're headed out. It's better to be over-prepared rather than under-prepared. Swapping out the last vinyl for the next while, I gave my spiel. I put the needle down just as I finished my last sentence. Taking off my headphones, I picked up my book yet again and began reading, totally forgetting about the stranger who was still in the bathroom. It wasn't until 45 minutes later, after I finished my 3rd coffee and really needed to pee, did I remember he was still in there. I half rushed down the hall and went to knock on the door with a, "Hey, sorry man, but..." when the door pushed open as soon as my hand met it. The bathroom was empty. The stranger was gone. Now, there were no windows in the bathroom. If you were to leave, you'd have to walk out of the bathroom, straight down the hall, and then turn left right past my desk to go out to the front door. So if he left it at any point, he would have walked right past me as I was sat there reading. Of course, I was beyond puzzled at this, but I did really still have to pee, so I did my business. I washed up and came to the conclusion that maybe I was just mistaken. Maybe the tow truck had gotten here early, and he left and I mistakenly thought he was in the bathroom. It still didn't explain how I never heard anyone leave, though. Upon drying my hands off, I walked back out to my desk and then stopped dead in my tracks when I rounded the corner. There at my coworker's desk was the stranger, sitting in exactly the same way, still facing out the window, as if he had never moved from the chair. I was very weirded out, but I like to consider myself a rational and level-headed person, and reasoned with myself that there had to be some sort of explanation for where this guy went. So I asked him, "Hey man, I thought you left. Where did you go? Did the tow truck come by yet?" Nothing. Not a word from this guy. At this point, I was just wondering what the hell his problem is. I didn't want to come off as bigoted, but I thought that maybe he just didn't speak English very well. I mean, he didn't seem like a threat. He was just really weird. I don't know. The kind of vibes I was getting from him were indescribable. Maybe he just went outside for some fresh air or something. It's pretty stuffy in here anyways. Not a big deal, I thought to myself. I was feeling a bit tired from not sleeping particularly well the previous day, and just chalked things up to my brain jumping at shadows. I decided that another cup of coffee might be a good idea to regain some brain power. I grabbed my mug and noticed the stranger's mug was also empty. "I'm grabbing some more coffee. You want some?" I asked. "Yes." The reply came almost instantly, in a deeper voice than mine, a stark contrast to the hushed tone he had used earlier, but I welcomed it, seeing as how he hadn't spoken a word to me since he initially showed up. With both mugs in hand, I went back to the kitchen. I emptied out the old grounds and filter and replenished the water before loading the machine with more coffee grounds. I decided to make a full fresh pot, seeing as how I'm tired and obviously the stranger likes the coffee, even if he didn't say much to me. Upon flipping the switch to start the brewing process, I turned and headed back to my desk as it would soon be time for my next commentary and the next album. He was gone. Again. Now I know for a fact that this time I didn't hear anybody get up and move around. No footsteps, no noises, no opening and closing of doors. Nothing. Yet he just disappeared. I checked the bathroom. The door was wide open and empty. Nobody was in the studio at the desk. Nobody was under the desk. Hell, I even checked in the desk for some reason. Nothing. Nobody was in the kitchen and nobody was in the storage room. That's the entire studio. And this stranger had just vanished. I walked back over to my desk and slumped into my chair, feeling half fearful and half bewildered. My mind was now going in circles, trying to figure out what the hell was going on here. I must have sat there going back and forth over possible scenarios for a good 5 minutes before I realized the record I had been playing ended, and it was time for commentary again. Still shaken, I picked up my headphones and tried to think of something to say. KRT3 here. We may be having a few technical issues here tonight, so I do apologize for any of our late night listeners. To make up for it, I have a special record up next. From one of my personal favorite artists, here's Waylon Jennings. As I changed out the vinyl, I was again startled by a sharp succession of knocks at the front door. Just as I dropped the needle, I scooted back with my chair and dropped the headphones on the desk, sitting and listening. We kept a .22 caliber rifle nearby the storage room just in case. It was a small town in the desert with lots of farms and ranches around. Not uncommon for most people to own firearms. And without thinking, I made my way over to grab it. With rifle in hand, I grabbed a few bullets from the box of ammunition stored next to it, and made my way to the front door. If this was the stranger out there at this point, I didn't care. Now I was looking out for myself. I peered out the peephole in the door and scanned what little of the surrounding area I could see. It took my eye a bit to adjust, but I could just barely make out a figure standing back away from the door. I could not tell who it was, though, since the blinds on the window were still open. I carefully shuffled over to my left and leaned my head over to see out of it. At this point, it was fairly dark and I couldn't see all too well, with the faint glow cast by the two outside lights mounted on either side of the front door, but I could make out someone standing there, approximately 20 feet from the door. It shared the same height as the stranger, but I couldn't make out any discernible details. I strained my eyes to look a little harder when a giant thud hit the door. The sound was so violent and so unexpected that I screamed and fell back onto the floor. Still clutching the rifle, I brought it to my chest with one hand and used the other to slide myself backwards. pushing wildly with my legs until I was up against the wall. Though my hands were shaking hard, I raised the rifle to the door and shouted, "I have a gun. I don't know who the hell you are, but you need to leave before I start shooting." My warning, however, went unheeded, and the door shook again with a crashing thud. I kept my composure as best I could, and kept the rifle trained on the door, ready to start letting off rounds. Thud, thud, thud. It repeated about every 20 seconds. After I don't even know how many times the front door was hit, my adrenaline hit a peak and I squeezed the trigger. A single shot rang out and pierced through the door around chest level. I quickly cycled the bolt and let off another round, hitting the door again not far from where the first round hit. Then there was silence. As the ringing in my ears lessened and my heavy breathing slowed a bit, I stood myself up and kept the rifle trained at the door, cycling the bolt for a new round just in case. I didn't want to chance opening the door and getting jumped by something or someone in case I missed, so I slowly worked my way over to the window where I could see if anything was sprawled out on the ground. When I was finally able to get a clear line of sight outside, I was horrified to see absolutely nothing. No person, no animal, nothing. My blood had run completely ice cold at this point. My rational brain had all but completely shut down, and I was now entirely submerged in fight or flight. Thud. The crashing noise started up again, but this time from the opposite side of the building. Like I mentioned earlier, the station was a brick building. The only possible way a noise of that magnitude would be possible is if you took a pickup truck and hit the wall with it going at least 20 miles an hour. Thud. Something hit again from the roof this time. Thud. Again, the front door shook. At this point, I was turning in circles trying to decide where to point the gun next. It was like I was being surrounded, and boy if I wasn't severely outnumbered. I slung the rifle on my back and made a quick dash down the hall toward the storage room. Turning and slamming the door once inside. Thankfully, this being a storage room, there were some decently heavy file cabinets along the wall. I managed to slide one in front of the door to block it off before turning and slumping myself down against the opposite wall, grabbing and pointing the rifle at the door at the same time. The loud thudding continued for some time before blending into what sounded like a symphony of fists knocking on every inch of the building. I was beyond frightened. I was trapped in this small room, and though I did have something to protect myself with, I didn't even know what I was up against. I had never experienced anything even remotely close to this in my life. I sat there with the rifle and listened as the symphony of knocks dwindled to just a single knock at the front door, before stopping altogether. Obviously, I didn't trust that whatever was out there was gone for good, so I waited about an hour, according to my watch, before even thinking of leaving the confines of the storage room. Pushing myself up off the laminate floor, all my muscles ached and my body felt heavy. Once my fight or flight wore off, I just went back to being completely exhausted. No amount of caffeine could help me now, but I knew that I still had to keep my wits about me and stay vigilant. Even though I had only fired the gun twice, I grabbed another handful of bullets from the box and shoved them into my pocket with the others. Better safe than sorry is a great principle to live by. I stood in front of the door and took a couple deep breaths to steel myself. I just need to get to the phone. I can call the sheriff and get them to send everything they've got. It'll only take a minute. I can do this. With those thoughts in mind, I pushed aside the filing cabinet and readied my weapon. 1, 2, 3. I threw open the door and brought the rifle up to both my hands immediately. I could see across the bathroom. It was empty. Slowly working my way out, I peered right towards the front door and then left to the kitchen area. Everything was as it should be, nothing in disarray. The chair to my coworker's desk was pushed in neatly. The kitchen still faintly smelled of coffee, but there was this heavy scent that hung thick in the air through the whole station. I hadn't noticed until after leaving the storage room. This might show my true age, but whatever. It's the best way I can describe it. Have you ever rolled your spare change into those wrappers so you can take them to the bank? After handling all those old pennies and quarters and whatnot, your hands get this very distinct earthy / coppery / metallic smell to them. That is precisely what it smelled like in there. The coppery smell. The eerie silence only broken by the sound of the vinyl player's needle skipping over the record I had put on last. The whole situation was messed up like I was in the set of some horror movie. But unlike those movies, with their, quite frankly, brain-dead protagonists, I only had one mission in mind, and that was to pick up the phone and call the sheriff. So I did. After assuring myself the place was indeed empty, I slung the rifle back over my shoulder and made my way into the kitchen. I grabbed the phone off its receiver and started wildly punching in the number for the sheriff's office. A small sense of relief was starting to wash over me as the dial tone started to sound, but that sense of relief did not last long at all. Over the eerie quiet that had befallen the station, over the dial tone of the phone, and the skipping of the record player, there was another noise. The sound of the front door's hinges ever so slowly opening. Through everything that had transpired that night, not once did it cross my mind to even lock the front door, and in that moment, I had felt fear like I'd never felt it before. My heartbeat, which I could feel thumping so prominently within my chest, through everything had increased by so much I could no longer feel it, and I'm sure my face must have been whiter than a fresh snowfall. I forgot all about the phone in my hand. I dropped it. I had zero grip strength left in me. Turning slowly around to face the front door, I saw the stranger was back. He stood back face towards me in the open doorway, arms at his sides, unmoving. The sound of the dial tone went quiet. The skipping of the record player, however, kept a steady rhythm. The only thing that pierced the silence were the words the stranger spoke. I need help. Now about here is where things get foggy for me. After those events, the very next thing I remember is the deep orange glow of the morning sun beaming on my face, and a firm hand on my shoulder. Dude, what are you doing out here? Are you okay? Are you hurt? What's going on? It was my coworker. Apparently, when he rolled up to the station for work that morning, he saw something out in the open desert across from the building. My coworker wore glasses and all around just genuinely had terrible vision, so he kind of just brushed it off because he couldn't make out any discernible details. But after walking up to the now closed front door of the station and noticing 2 perfect bullet holes right through it, he became intrigued and quickly went inside. I was gone. There was a cold cup of coffee on my desk, and the needle on the last vinyl I played was sitting off the record, as if someone had taken the time to stop it from repeatedly skipping. He called out for me and checked every room of the station, becoming increasingly concerned when he could find no trace of me anywhere, and found the rifle missing from the storage room. He returned outside and walked to the road when he noticed the figure in the desert had moved closer. Just barely being able to discern its features now as a human, he started to walk towards it, forming into a sprint once he got close enough to notice it was in fact me standing out there. And that is where I woke up. I was standing in the middle of the desert, arms laid at my side, back pinned straight, just staring out at the horizon. My coworker brought me back to the radio station and phoned the sheriff, telling him the state he found me in, and about the bullet holes in the door. Apparently the sheriff's station did get a call that night, but the operator hung up as there was nobody on the other end of the phone. I couldn't even speak for myself at this point. It was as if my mind had just completely broken, leaving me as a living, breathing shell of a human. Eventually, the sheriff and a couple deputies did turn up as well as an ambulance. Everyone tried to ask me questions about that night, and knew I couldn't tell anyone what I witnessed. They would have just labeled me as crazy, and locked me away in an institution or something. So with what little grip of my sanity I could muster, I spun them a short tale about some crazed drifter that tried to assault me that night. Obviously, they were a bit dubious about my story, as there was no blood from any of the shots I fired, and no sign that anyone else had been there with me that night. Hell, I learned later on apparently there wasn't even a second coffee mug found. Just the one I used. But as they had no other evidence to go off of, that is the official explanation for what happened to me according to the law. I stayed at the local hospital for a couple days so they could monitor me. The first day they loaded me up with Ativan, as I was still in somewhat of a state of shock and couldn't function, but ultimately I was released a few days later with a clean bill of health. I did briefly get a chance to speak with some of the locals I usually conversed with at the diner after the incident. They asked me how I was, and I reassured them that I would be fine. Ray, who was the one that specifically requested that Hank Williams album, would have been up late listening to my broadcast that night, so I asked him if anything seemed off about it, or if he noticed the dead air after I stopped playing music. He told me he stayed up a bit later after the music I played for him, as he was working on installing some new parts for his farm truck that night, but that he didn't notice anything unusual. Nobody else I knew caught my broadcast after about 8 p.m. I still don't exactly have an explanation for what happened that night. I remember years later learning about wendigos and skinwalkers and all the cryptids of the desert, but the coppery blood smell usually associated with the first two entities, but ultimately, I just don't know. I ended up moving to Canada a couple years later and no longer have contact with anyone back home. Most of my family is dead, and I really just don't have a reason to go back there. Ever since I left, I haven't experienced anything like that in my life ever again. Some days I still wonder if the radio station is still standing, and if anyone else has seen the stranger. But as far as I know, I'm the only one to come across him. That night left me with a giant mental scar I'll never truly be able to forget. If anyone has any ideas on what I might have come across that night, I would love to hear some suggestions, as I really don't have the faintest clue. Some roads feel like they remember you better than people do. We were driving back late, me, my girlfriend asleep next to me, and Havana, our 2.5-year-old dog, curled up on the passenger side like she owned it. The air was cool, the sky was moonless, the kind of night where the world seems to shrink down to just your headlights and your thoughts. The GPS had rerouted us off the main road to avoid traffic. I took the turn without thinking, but once we were a few kilometers in, it started to feel like the road had taken me. There was nothing memorable about it visually. Flat, straight, just trees on either side, and the kind of quiet that gets under your skin. But something about it started pressing on a part of me I hadn't felt in a long time. A pressure behind the ribs, a heaviness that wasn't about tiredness. That's when I saw someone up ahead. A man on the side of the road, not waving, not panicked, just standing there, calm. I slowed down, and as the lights caught his face, I nearly forgot to breathe. "Marco?" He smiled. "Hey, Peter." I pulled over, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Ivana perked her ears but didn't growl, just looked at him like he belonged there. I got out. Marco looked older, like me, but his posture was the same, relaxed but alert. He always had this way of noticing everything without needing to talk about it. I hadn't seen him since we were maybe 11. He was never the loud kind of friend. We didn't climb trees or build forts or throw water balloons at girls. We just talked, in hallways, On slow walks after school, we'd found each other because neither of us liked pretending to be interested in the things everyone else seemed obsessed with. I never played with Lego. He didn't play soccer. We found connection in the quiet places between everything. And this road, this one exactly, was where we used to walk together. After school, before the streetlights came on, it cut behind the newer blocks and curved near an old train yard that doesn't exist anymore. We used to sit on a cracked bench back there and talk about things that felt too big to say out loud anywhere else. Like where we'd be in 20 years. Like whether anyone would still remember us. Like what it meant to feel invisible, even when surrounded by people. And then one day, he was just gone. No explanation, no warning. He didn't move away in the way that kids usually do, with boxes and teary goodbyes. He just disappeared. Empty seat in class. No forwarding address. I asked once, maybe twice, but no one had answers. And I didn't push. I just let him vanish. Now here he was on this road again, like no time had passed. "I never got to say goodbye," he said. His voice hadn't changed. Still soft, still grounded. He looked toward the road like it was familiar too. "I didn't even know you'd left," I said. "I know," he said, "but you remembered this road." "I didn't mean to. But something in you did. You came back when you needed to. That's what this place was always for." I didn't understand what he meant. Not fully. Not yet. But he kept going. "You used to talk to me when no one else did. You let me be quiet without making me feel wrong for it. You asked real questions, and when my life was going to hell, you didn't even know it, but you gave me a place to be safe." I looked away. That lump in my throat was back. "You helped me carry something I didn't have words for back then. Now I'm here to return the favor." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what to do with the ache in my chest. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "No," he said gently. "You're functional." He looked at me like I'd said something untrue about my own body, like he was the scaffolding inside me for what it really was. "You've been unraveling slowly for a while," he said. "You show up, you get the work done, you hold conversations, but inside you're bone tired, worn down by the pressure to keep it together, and no one sees it, not the way I do." I didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong. I'd been going through the motions, delivering on expectations, solving problems, nodding along in meetings, but something deeper had been leaking out of me, something I hadn't told anyone about. That feeling like the floor could give out at any second, that brittle edge just beneath the surface of every task, every social obligation, every smile. "You've convinced everyone you're okay," he said. "Even her." He gestured toward the car. "But you're not." I felt something hot building behind my eyes. Then he glanced at the passenger seat. "She knows, though," he said, nodding at Havana. "She keeps you tethered. Every day, you think she's just a good companion, but she's more than that. She pulls you out of the fog, reminds you there's joy and safety, even in tiny moments." I looked at her through the window. She was watching me, tail tapping once, then still, like she understood every word. "You've got more strength than you give yourself credit for," he said, "but strength isn't the same as not needing help." "I don't know what to do," I said quietly. "You don't need to do anything tonight. Just feel it. Let yourself stop pretending for once. That's why I'm here." He looked back down the road, and for the first time I realized something. He didn't look like someone visiting. He looked like someone returning home. You came back now because you knew I was close to breaking. He nodded. This was our place. You were most you here. Before you learned to hide, I figured maybe if you came back, you'd remember how to come back to yourself. I took a step forward, but he was already backing away. Not vanishing, not disappearing, just walking into the dark, like someone leaving a room that wasn't theirs to stay in. I watched until I couldn't anymore. Then I got into the car. My girlfriend stared and squeezed my hand, still half asleep. Havana leaned gently against my leg with that quiet, solid love that doesn't ask questions. We drove. The road didn't feel hollow anymore, just quiet, real, steady. I don't know what Marco was. Memory, ghost, guardian. All I know is that I needed him, and somehow he knew exactly where to find me. That's the thing about the right kind of friendship. Even when time and distance tear it from the surface, something underneath remembers. A hidden map, a place. He came back to remind me I'm not alone in this. That I never really was. And that sometimes saving someone doesn't look like a grand act. Sometimes it looks like showing up on the side of the road, right when the silence gets too loud. I haven't told anyone this. Not my family, not my friends. I'm not even sure why I'm writing it down here. I guess I just need someone to believe me. Or at least to read this before it happens again tonight. It's been exactly 1 year since my younger brother Elias died. He was 3 years younger than me, but always seemed older. Calmer, kinder, more grounded. Well, I was the loud one. The one who pushed boundaries. Elias was the type to read in silence, to smile without needing a reason. The cancer hit fast. Acute leukemia. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. They gave us a few months, maybe, but in the end, it was barely 8 weeks. I spent most of that time with him. I helped him eat when he couldn't lift his arms, held his hand when he was too weak to speak. Tried to joke around just to make him laugh. In the final hours, when he was barely there, he looked right at me, not scared, not sad, just knowing. "Don't stay alone," he whispered. That was the last thing he ever said. After that, everything shut down. There was a flat line on the monitor, a few soft words from the nurse, and then nothing. The world just stopped. I didn't cry much, not at first. I think part of me refused to believe he was really gone. I disconnected from everything. School, friends, routines. I slept all day, stayed awake all night, barely ate. I thought maybe the silence would help me process it. Instead, it left space for something else. The first time I heard his voice again, it was around 3 a.m. I hadn't been asleep, just lying there staring at the ceiling. The window cracked open to let in the late October wind. "Are you there?" It was faint, soft, coming from the hallway. I froze not because I was afraid, but because I knew that voice. I got up, opened the door, turned on the lights. Nothing. Every door was locked, windows closed. No sound except my own heartbeat. The next night it happened again. Same time, same voice. "Are you there?" I told myself it was a trick of memory, auditory hallucinations, lack of sleep. That made sense, right? But the voice kept coming back. Every night at 3 a.m. sharp. And then the footsteps started. Soft, deliberate steps across the hallway floor, stopping just outside my bedroom. Never louder than a whisper, but impossible to ignore. Eventually I started locking my door at night. I played white noise, music, anything. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with a podcast playing just to drown it out, but none of it worked. The sound always cut through. Always him. Then came the knocking. 3 soft taps, then his voice closer now. "Please, open the door." It never sounded threatening, not angry or vengeful, just pleading, almost sad. I told myself I wouldn't give in. I wasn't going to open the door. I wasn't going to play into whatever this was. Grief, trauma, madness. But it didn't stop. Then it got worse. I started finding things around the apartment, objects I hadn't seen in years. Stuff I knew was in a box on the attic, sealed and forgotten. A small, worn-out toy dinosaur on the windowsill. His favorite. The one he carried everywhere as a kid. A half-drunk Capri Sun on the kitchen table. Wild cherry. The exact flavor he used to beg Mom to buy. Each day, something new. Each night, his voice. Like the past was leaking into the present, or something was trying to lure me back. Last night, I found his old diary on my desk. It had gone with him to the hospital. I'd packed it in his bag. He never wrote much in it, but it was something that brought him comfort. It never came back home with us. I'm absolutely certain of that. And yet there it was. Dusty, locked, familiar. I opened it. Only one sentence had been added, written in a shaky but unmistakable hand on the last page. "I found a place for you." That's when I knew this wasn't just memory. This wasn't just grief. Something was actively reaching out. I've tried everything. I left town, booked hotel rooms, stayed with friends. I even rented a cabin hours away, in the middle of nowhere, and turned off my phone, but no matter where I go, at 3 a.m. I hear him, even when I'm awake, even when I know he can't possibly be there. And every night his voice changes, just a little, subtle at first, a slightly slower rhythm, a flatter tone, like a recording wearing down, like a mask slowly slipping. If it's really Elias, why does he sound less and less like himself with every visit? Tonight is the anniversary of his death, 1 full year, and I'm hearing him already. No waiting for 3 a.m. this time. He's early. I hear footsteps in the hallway, slower than usual, more deliberate, closer. Then the whisper, "Please, open the door." I shouldn't. I know I shouldn't. Every part of me screams not to. But something inside me is whispering that tonight is different. That if I open it now, it might finally end. That maybe I'll see him just one more time. That maybe it won't stop unless I do. I'm standing up now. I'm walking to the door. My hand is on the lock. I'm going to open it. You don't need to know my name. It's not important. And I know that I'm bad at writing, but I need to get this down before you follow in my footsteps and find yourself on that dirt road, leading to that place. Once you've entered, they don't let you leave. I should have listened to my gut when it told me something seriously sinister was hiding out in the dark corners and hallways of that horrible building. Something that I would come face to face with that very night. This was in 2017. My friends and I had done a lot of abandoned exploring as a group when we were still in high school. Mostly old churches, malls, and some crack houses that were usually inhabited by junkies shooting up, or homeless people needing a place to warm up for the winter. We would stock up on beers, spray cans, and whatever change we could put together between the three of us to buy some weed. It started out tame. We were just a bunch of stupid teenagers exploring old buildings, all while getting hammered and stoned in the process. We had a cheap handheld camera David got for a school film project we would use to record our adventures. Most of the footage was just our antics and vandalism we would do in these abandoned places, thinking it was the coolest thing at the time. Mark would even edit the videos during the week and post them in our group chat, and that's how we spent the rest of our summer, each abandoned place getting crazier than the last until we had seen it all in our town. One Friday night in November, David and Mark were at my place, where we would drink and smoke every weekend, thinking about the next place we would explore. We had already been everywhere in town, and it was getting repetitive. That's when we settled on the Elm Creek Health Facility, an abandoned mental asylum 45 minutes up north of town. We heard stories about kids exploring and going missing, but obviously, urban legends weren't holding us back from having a good time. David had a great-grandmother who was admitted there in the 40s because of her severe schizophrenia and manic episodes. Doing my research on the place now, it was famous back then for its inhumane experiments on patients, and was closed down in 1963 after many cases of abuse were reported. The facility was shut down, but the building remained. The rain battered down on the windshield of my car as we made our way north of the highway. I was 4 beers deep, and to sober up, I kept the windows rolled down in the pouring rain. We exited off the highway and made our way east towards the industrial side of town, where a dirt road led to the facility. That feeling I spoke about earlier was overwhelming me. A sense of existential dread, fear, and excitement washed over me as we turned into the dirt road, only lit by my headlights. The rain was still coming down heavily, only stopping when we were enshrouded in the tall and thick trees along the dirt road. We parked when we reached the no trespassing gate. Mark handed David and me flashlights, and we set out on the path to the building on foot. We joked about not making it out alive, as a means to project what we were feeling. We were all scared, but wouldn't admit it. Mark was on camera duty and started rolling as soon as the building was in sight. The building stood high in the sky, overgrown with vines and leaves, covering the boarded-up windows. We were lighting up a joint when we first heard the voice. "You guys exploring too? There's an entrance over here. Come here and I'll show you." The voice rang out in the cold rain, emanating from somewhere outside of the building. When Mark responded to the voice and said, "Yeah, we've never been here. Where are you?" No answer. We couldn't see where the voice had come from as we were still far from the building, so we just shrugged it off as another group of explorers. And maybe we would get the chance to see them when we got inside. We approached the building and scouted the perimeter for any entrance points we could find until we found an open window behind a grate. Mark kicked the grate in, and we descended into the basement of the building. The smell was the first thing that hit us. Mold and rotten wood. The room was full of graffiti, and medical instruments and books were strewn haphazardly around the room. Smashed beer bottles and cigarette butts littered the floor, and made it apparent that we were not the first or the last people to ever enter this building. We made our way out of the room and down one of the long and winding corridors, asking, "Hello, is anyone there?" To which we received no response. We brushed it off as maybe the group had left before we made it up to the building, even though we knew it wasn't possible, and we continued before Mark stopped us and said, "I heard this place has a room where they did experiments on patients. It would be sick to get on film. Let's split up, and if one of us finds it, call the others." Before I could object, he was walking down the staircase with the camera pointed at his face, talking to the audience vlog style. David was just as scared as me, but to look unbothered, He offered to take the third floor and let me explore the main floor on my own. I went room by room, shaking with nervousness and mentally documenting what I saw to tell the others later. When we were done, the feeling of being watched was enough for me to start calling out to Mark and David, to which I received no response. That was when I started running back towards the beginning of the corridor to where we had split up in the first place. That was where I saw him. Mark was standing in the corridor, back turned to me and not moving. "Mark, what? This isn't the time to joke around. I want to leave." He didn't move. A chill ran down my spine as the man turned around and revealed himself. It wasn't Mark. It was me. The man was a carbon copy of my face except for the soulless void of black in his eyes. His face twisted up into a grin. My body was frozen and I stared in horror as he mimicked me perfectly. "Are you lost, Jason?" I backed away slowly, tripping over garbage on the floor in the process. "Why are you trying to leave, Jason? They don't let you leave here, just like David's great-grandmother." I regained my footing and turned toward the staircase. I raced down the stairs towards the basement we entered, tripping and stumbling while trying to convince myself this was some sort of elaborate prank. That was when I heard him start to run. He chased me down the stairs and throughout the basement until I got to the room we entered. I halted across the lawn, not looking back even when I heard the distant shrieking of David and Mark. Trembling with fear, I got to my car, put it in reverse, and drove to a gas station 2 miles away. When I called the cops, a search party went to the facility to find David and Mark. They are still missing to this day. Every night in my dreams, I am in that building. If you ever find yourself on that dirt road, remember this. They don't let you leave. I noticed it first with my keys. I've had the same keychain since college. An old bottle opener from a bar I don't even remember going to. I never changed it. It's worn smooth from years in my pocket. The logo faded to almost nothing. But one morning last month, I picked them up from the counter and felt off. The keys looked the same, but they didn't feel right. The weight was off, like someone had swapped out the actual keys for copies. One of the teeth on my apartment key was shorter, slightly rounded, but when I tested them, everything worked. Door opened, mailbox too. So I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I dropped them. Maybe something bent. That's how it started, though. Small enough that you think it's just stress. Work's been rough lately. Sleep hasn't been great, so you brush it off. Then the email came. It was a receipt for a coffee shop I don't go to, some indie spot across town. The charge hit my card around 8:42 a.m. I checked my phone's health app. At that time, I was in the shower. I remember being in the shower, but the receipt had my name, my card. Everything matched. I googled the cafe. They had a little online ordering system. You could leave a note for the barista. Mine said, "See you tomorrow." I started checking my accounts more often after that. There were more weird purchases. A small charge at a gas station I've never been to. A subscription to a language learning app. Someone ordered sushi at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. Something I never do. The kicker? They ordered what I might almost pick. Not my usual, but not something I'd hate either. I figured maybe my card had been stolen, but then why were the purchases so close? Too subtle to notice unless I was actively looking. And then my coworker asked how the concert was. "What concert?" I asked. She laughed. "The one you posted about on your story? Looked amazing. I never post stories. I barely post at all. I pulled up my account. Nothing there. But I checked my camera roll, and there were pictures. Low quality shots from the back of a crowd. A band I sort of like. Someone had zoomed in, tried to catch the lights, the stage, the vibe. The timestamps matched what my coworker said. Only problem? I wasn't there. I spiraled a little after that. Thought maybe I was sleepwalking, or maybe dissociating. I'd been stressed. Maybe I was blacking out, losing time. So I did what you're probably thinking. I set up a camera in my bedroom. Cheap webcam, motion triggered, just to ease my mind. The next morning I checked the footage. I never left the bed. But at 3:12 a.m. I sat up. I sat up perfectly straight, rigid, and stared at the bedroom door. Then without blinking I said, "You need to stop watching me." My voice, my face, but it didn't feel like me. I grew up in a house where pets never lasted long. Doesn't matter what we brought home. Goldfish, birds, a kitten once. They either disappeared or just died. Always in weird ways. Like there was this parrot we had. One morning he was chirping like crazy. Happy, loud. That night, dead. Lying stiff at the bottom of his cage. One wing bent in the wrong direction, neck twisted like someone snapped it and forgot to finish the job. There were these little drops of green stuff around him. His eyes were wide open, staring up at the ceiling like he'd seen something bad. And the goldfish? That night, I swear to God, they all floated up at once. Bodies stiff, mouths half open, stuck like they were still trying to scream underwater. If you watched long enough, it almost felt like they were whispering something. I didn't understand. I didn't want to. My parents acted like it was normal, until one day they put cameras all over the house. They didn't tell me why, they just said it was for security. But the next morning, I caught them whispering in the kitchen. "Did you see it last night?" Mom asked real low. Dad didn't answer right away. Then he muttered, "It's reacting faster than we thought." Reacting to what? I remember standing there watching them. They smiled when they saw me like nothing was wrong. "Morning, sweetie. Breakfast's almost ready. Did you pack your school bag?" They always smiled too wide. A few days later, they took me to meet this uncle. I don't remember his name. I barely remember the drive there. I just know that halfway through talking to him, I started feeling tired, like heavy, like my bones didn't want to stay up. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back home, Mom and Dad standing over me smiling. From now on, they said, you should write a diary every night. Write down everything you do, everything you think. Be a good boy. So I did because I was a good boy. At first the diary was normal, me writing about school, homework, dumb stuff, but then stuff started appearing in the diary that I didn't write. In red ink, things like, you weren't polite to your teacher today. Don't sneak snacks after dinner. Sometimes there were drawings, little crude sketches of my room, of me. I thought maybe Santa Claus was watching, or some guardian angel. I tried not to freak out, but it kept getting worse. The diary started telling me about things that hadn't happened yet. There will be a fire drill tomorrow. Don't panic. Guess what? There was a fire drill. Then it started telling me what to think, who to trust, who not to question. Don't worry about where Dad went last night. He's doing it for you. Trust the process. process. By the time I was a teenager, I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. One night when my parents were out, I snuck into their room, found their laptop, found a folder on the desktop. Experiment number 12. Inside, hundreds of photos of me. Charts, brain scans, notes, all about me. There was one file I can't get out of my head. Subject 12. Neural restructuring at 60%. Dream function terminated successfully. Antisocial personality framework initializing. What was happening to me? I ran to the bathroom, looked in the mirror. For a second, I swear to God, I didn't recognize myself. My reflection smiled before I did. I grabbed a razor, sliced my finger. Green. The blood was green. And then behind me, Dad's voice. Calm. Too calm. You're almost one of us. I don't know how much time I have left. I still write in the diary every night, but now the replies come before I've even finished writing. Sometimes they tell me things I don't want to know. Sometimes they tell me things I'm about to do. And lately, the handwriting. It's starting to look like mine. So, you know those double-sided Q-tips you use for makeup application or cleaning out your ears? I discovered a sentient one. Let me start this off by saying I'm a 23-year-old female. I live alone in a decent-sized apartment in a fairly busy suburb. My name is Ava, but I don't think that's important to my story. Now, I'm sure many of you have bought Q-tips at some point in your life. I mean, come on. They're sold at practically every convenience store, at every Cub or Walmart or Walgreens. I'm sure when it boils down to it, there are very few stores that don't sell Q-tips, even if they're just the generic ones called cotton swabs. Well, my story begins a couple weeks ago, so let's start there. I was getting ready to go out and I grabbed a few Q-tips to help blend my makeup. Something about one of them felt, I don't know, off. Like there was this unsettling aura coming off of it that shouldn't be. Because it's just an inanimate object, right? I use it anyway, despite the odd feeling, like an idiot. As some eyeshadow smeared onto the cotton, the aura changed from unsettling to almost threatening. My body jolted and the Q-tip fell from my hands and onto the floor of my bedroom. I tried to put it out of my mind as I got ready, and as I'm about to leave the room, I grab it and throw it out with the others before heading out for a fun night with friends. When I get home and put my car keys on top of the cabinet by the front door, I jump. Sitting there, right beside my key dish, is a used Q-tip I didn't put there. As I take note of the makeup smudge, I realize it's the same one from earlier. I once again throw it away before heading to bed. When I wake up, slightly hungover, I see the Q-tip on my nightstand next to my cup of water. It looks like the same one, but that can't be possible, right? So now, whenever a smudged Q-tip shows up, I throw it out. But every time, it appears somewhere where I'm guaranteed to find it. To see it, on the bathroom counter, by the soap, sitting on the edge of the kitchen table, on my vanity where I get ready, and each time the Q-tip reappears, it's bigger. The growth was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but now it's around 5 feet. The plastic stick in the center is much thicker. There's far more cotton on the swabs. I can't throw it out anymore. Hell, it's kind of heavy. A couple days ago, when I woke up, it was in bed with me, under the covers, the aura still menacing. After doing my morning business in the bathroom, I headed to the kitchen to make breakfast. As I do so, I kid you not, I feel cotton brush against my arm, but it stings, almost burns. I turned around and there, right behind me, is the Q-tip. somehow standing on its smudged swab. I looked at the arm next, but figure there's no point, because there's no way a Q-tip could harm me, right? But when I looked down at my arm, where it brushed against me, not only is my literal skin smudged, I can see my bone. I screamed. Loud. It doesn't hurt though, so I pinch myself, figuring I must be dreaming. But I don't wake up. It's been a couple days since it smudged me, since I was first able to see my bone. I still can. It hasn't changed. My bone is still there, like the Q-tip just smudged everything off, leaving a round crater at the bottom of which I can see my arm bone. I'm writing this now because I need help. 20 minutes ago, the cotton of the Q-tip brushed up against my leg, and now it's like my arm. Skin that has seemingly been smeared away, just disappeared, but the bone is still there beneath the smudged away skin. I still can't feel any sort of pain, but I also know that this is real. And I don't know what to do. I don't know who to turn to, because I fear they'll think I'm crazy. What if others can't see my smudged away skin? What if it looks normal to others, even though the skin and flesh is completely gone, and they think I'm crazy and lock me up? I think it's going to slowly smudge me away, like I used to smudge my makeup. Does anyone know what I should do? This is both a plea for help and a warning. If a Q-tip seems off to you, whatever you do, don't use it. The first time I heard the hum, it was in the dead of night. Snow had blanketed the town in a heavy, sound-dampening hush, and the only noise in my house was the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. I was drifting somewhere between sleep and wakefulness when it started. A low, mournful melody, barely audible but impossible to ignore. At first I thought it was the wind howling through the eaves, but this was different. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, rhythmic, almost human. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, straining to listen. The hum seemed to be coming from inside the house. My heart started to race as I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand. But as soon as the light flickered on, the sound was gone, like it had been swallowed by the darkness itself. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of a half-dreaming mind. But when I went to the window, I froze. There were footprints in the snow, starting at the edge of the woods and leading straight to my house. They stopped abruptly beneath my bedroom window, as if whoever, or whatever, had been out there had been watching me. The next morning, the town was buzzing with the news. Mrs. Avery, a neighbor 2 doors down, was missing. Her house was locked up tight, her car untouched in the driveway. The only thing anyone noticed was an odd sound, like faint humming, drifting around her property. Now I can't stop hearing it. The hum follows me everywhere I go, growing louder and closer, as if it's waiting for me to figure out what it wants. Or to take me, too. At first, I thought I was going mad. A sentient hum that wants to take me. It made no sense, but as the missing persons reports kept flooding the bulletin boards, I knew something had to be happening. On the 16th of August, the mayor held a press conference. I'm flipping through channels when I spot her familiar face on channel 7. I listen in. Madam Watson, what is happening with all these people? A reporter queries. We want answers. The mayor responds. There is an ongoing police investigation, and we are working hard to find your loved ones and bring them home safe. The camera zoomed in on the mayor's face. her calm demeanor faltering as the crowd's frustration erupted in a storm of shouts. "BS!" someone screamed from the back, their voice cutting through the noise. "You've been saying that for 2 weeks." The mayor's expressions shifts. She seems uncomfortable, like she's holding something back. I lay there, silent. The moon casts a soft shadow on the back end of my room. I drift away to sleep when suddenly I hear it. I can't pinpoint where it's coming from. It's like a surround sound speaker turned to the lowest volume. The hum is soft yet eerie. I stand up, listening closer. I still don't know where it's coming from. I decided to investigate, so I equipped myself with a flashlight and an old, dull kitchen knife. I hesitated at the edge of the woods, my flashlight beam barely penetrating the thick darkness ahead. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the cursed hum, pulled me forward. It was as if I had no choice. The footprints continued well into the woods. Animals howling and snow breaking under my boots keep my mind off the god-awful hum in the background. Continuing, I see that the footprints veer off the trail into the denser, wilder area of the forest. As I pressed deeper into the woods, I felt the hum crawling under my skin. My head throbbed. My vision swam, and for a moment, I thought I heard my name woven into the melody. The footprints, almost unnatural in size, led me to a small opening. Inside was a quaint cabin, but it felt wrong. It looked ancient, yet new at the same time. The wood was plentiful with cracks, yet the hinges were freshly oiled. The door was slightly ajar, as though it was inviting me in. Stepping in the clearing, the hum was deafening. It smothered my mind in darkness. I raised my flashlight and stepped forward, the crunching snow becoming a haven from the hum. Then I saw it. Movement inside. I stood there a moment. Should I have gone back? I whispered to no one. I was in too deep now. I enter the cabin. The floorboards a symphony under my weight. I clear the cabin, but no one is inside. Looking deeper, I see musical instruments. A piano, its keys yellowed with age, an old 6-string with 1 string snapped, and a gramophone, gleaming flawlessly despite the state of the cabin. On the platter lay an aged record, its label faded. I extend my hand, now trembling, to pick it up, but the hum grows. It's no longer an organized melody. It's a scream. It's a fighter jet taking flight in my mind. I stumble back, my hands grasping my head in pain. Something moves in the shadows, a flicker just beyond the reach of my flashlight. "No," I muttered, my voice shaking. I turned and bolted, nearly tripping over the doorway in my haste. The hum receded as I ran, fading to a faint, almost soothing drone that nestled in the back of my mind. When I finally stumbled into my bed hours later, the hum was still there, dormant but present. Its rhythm a sinister lullaby. Sleep came, but peace did not. I stood in line in the mayor's office, humming softly under my breath without realizing it. The realization jolted me, and I clamped my mouth shut. When my turn came, the secretary gestured for me to enter. Inside, Mayor Watson sat behind a massive oak desk, her expression unreadable. "What can I do for you?" she asked. Her tone clipped. I dove straight in. "I need answers about the disappearances. The hum, what is it? I know you're hiding something." Her gaze sharpened, but she didn't react immediately. "That's a dangerous assumption," she said, leaning forward, "and one I suggest you keep to yourself." "I hear it," I said, my voice shaking. "The hum, everyone who's heard it is gone. What's happening to me?" Her face tightened, and for a moment, she seemed to weigh her words carefully. Finally, she sighed. "My great-grandfather created it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A song. He wanted it to be perfect, but it became something else. It feeds on curiosity, draws people in. It always leads to the same place." "The cabin," I said, the word falling from my lips like a stone. Her expression darkened. "No one who goes there comes back, and every time, it gets stronger." I shuddered, the hum growing louder in my mind, as if reacting to her words. She stood abruptly, her gaze hard. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice final. "Leave, before it's too late." As I walk to the exit, the hum grows louder in my head, reverberating off my skull. I exit, trying to ignore the intensity. It continues back home. My body began to move on its own. I tried to fight it. My mind screamed for control, but my body no longer obeyed. Each step toward the cabin felt like sinking deeper into quicksand. Inescapable, suffocating. The hum swelled, a living thing coiling tighter around my thoughts. When I reached the clearing, the cabin stood waiting, its crooked frame illuminated by the pale moonlight. My vision blurred, the edges of reality folding in on themselves. I could feel it. The hum wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside me, rewriting me. The door creaked open as if it had been expecting me. The gramophone gleamed in the center of the room, its brass horn catching the faint light. My hand reached for the record, trembling but purposeful, as though it no longer belonged to me. When the needle touched the vinyl, the hum erupted into a symphony, haunting, beautiful, and devastating all at once. It was everything. Joy, despair, love, and terror, woven into a melody that consumed me. My body sagged, and for a moment I felt weightless, as if I were dissolving into the music itself. I wasn't alone. Shadows emerged from the walls, faint outlines of those who had come before me. Their eyes glowed faintly, their mouths moving in unison to the hum. I tried to scream, but no sound came. They weren't trapped. They were the hum. My vision faded, but I could still hear the song, now clearer than ever. It whispered promises, beckoning others. It wasn't just music. It was a message, a signal, and I was its newest voice. The next morning the hum began again, faint but insistent, drifting over the town. Another would hear it soon, another would follow, and I would be waiting. The ocean is large and mysterious, and the fact that we know so little about it makes it especially creepy. Tonight we will be going over some horror stories involving just that. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. It helps out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I'm currently trying to reach 125,000 subscribers, and we're getting pretty close. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. The Challenger Deep is the deepest point of our planet, 6.8 miles below the ground we walk on, and nearly completely desolate. A true marvel on the Earth, and a miraculous piece of geography. Up until recently, most scientists believed that the Challenger Deep was the deepest point of our Earth. Keyword, recently. I work for the NOAA, or National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as a submersible pilot. I've been on countless dives and seen countless things. It's an amazing job, one that I can't imagine ever not taking. If there is one place to appreciate nature and life as we know it, it's the ocean. Yet, the vastness of the ocean is a horrifying concept. We are slow in the water, and in the parts of the ocean where you can't see anything below you, it is hard to shake the thought of some massive marine predator snatching you up in its jaws. Despite this, our research knows no bounds, and around a month ago, my team made a massive discovery. A shift in the tectonic plates showed us that, in the cracks of the Challenger Deep, there was something below it, an entirely unexplored and unknown region of our world. The team was ecstatic, and negotiations for a press release were immediately brought to our supervisor. Unfortunately, he decided not to go ahead with the news just yet. According to him, after talks with the heads of the NOAA, they wanted us to go on an expedition to see what was there, and then showcase our findings to the world. I wasn't pleased with this, but I knew that it would make a better headline in the news if we actually found stuff down there. As one of the most experienced submersible pilots, I was chosen to head the mission. It would be a solo mission, one that, in my supervisor's words, would change the way we saw the ocean forever. So, after a ton of preparations and warnings and papers, my submersible was hovering over the water. My legs pointed directly at the opening to this new, deeper subsection of Earth's crust. My submersible, named Apollo by me, was reinforced heavily, with intense fortifications and the best titanium money could buy. She was a beautiful thing, one that I could never see myself as worthy of piloting. Yet, with one swift motion, I was dropped in the sea. I won't bore you with the details of the descent, as nothing out of the ordinary occurred. I saw numerous creatures, critters, and otherwise, but nothing there was something I hadn't seen before. Aside from a sperm whale swimming above me that made me nearly crap myself. After roughly 3 hours, I had finally hit the Challenger Deep. Admittedly, I was a little scared. Despite my numerous adventures into the bowels of deep blue, I had never actually been here at the bottom. It was empty. Not a speck of life besides maybe some bacteria. If loneliness could have a textbook definition, it would be this: dark, cold, and desolate. The fact anything could live down here whatsoever was unbelievable. Move forward. My intercom sprung to life, jolting me out of my complete awe. I had completely forgotten why I was here, trapped in the sheer complexity of the nothingness of this place. I complied, moving Apollo upwards a bit, and that's when I saw it. A massive gash in the seafloor, stretching for what could have been miles. It was wide, too, almost the entire width of a school bus. This wasn't what was shown in our scannings, with the gap being smaller and less wide. Whatever we had seen before, it had expanded. I reported this to my supervisor, who shared the same mild perturbance that I did. Maybe another shift occurred here recently. Maybe. His lackluster answer to my report did not inspire confidence. But I had to keep going. I am about to enter the opening, I said with a very obvious amount of uncertainty in my voice. Go ahead. Good luck, man, my supervisor responded. And with that, I entered the new, deepest point of our Earth. The opening was normal in nature, with nothing but rock and earth surrounding my descent for the first 20 meters or so. However, after this, it all became dark again. There was no more wall, no more gash. I checked my sonar, and my mouth dropped to the floor in sheer amazement. I was inside a gigantic cave, nearly 1 mile on diameter. I was at a loss of words, my thoughts taking over where my mouth couldn't. My mind began to race, with intense ideas and fears and terrors unveiling themselves. What could be down here? Is it dangerous? Will I die? Etc. I reported my findings to my supervisor, who was, just like me, completely starstruck. "Are you sure that's what you see?" My supervisor sputtered out. "Yes." The submarine had been equipped with the latest technology, and one of those was a radar, just in case anything like a whale or other large creature happened to be approaching me. This radar never failed, but it hadn't sprung to life in hours due to the lack of anything big at this depth. Yet it was suddenly firing off. I moved to look at it, and to my both amazement and terror, 5 large blips were moving towards me. I tried to keep myself together, desperately breathing in and out in a pathetic attempt to keep myself from hyperventilating, but it wasn't working. Nothing of this size should be down at this depth. My mind began to picture beasts, monsters, and ravenous creatures coming to rip me apart. In my nervous state, I hadn't realized my supervisor had been trying to talk to me. After nearly tripping over myself, I clumsily reopened the line. "Why have you stopped? What is it?" My supervisor sternly, yet curiously asked. "There's 5 something moving towards me, sir. I have no idea what they are." I stammered out, my voice shaky and completely broken by the fear that gripped my throat. "Wait, are you serious? How big are they?" My supervisor asked. I checked the blips. They were 5 seconds from my position. They weren't massive, but they were still too big for this environment. A solid 7 to 9 feet in length. Roughly 8 feet. Just then, I felt a strong, hard, and intense hit come from the outside. Not like something was trying to break in, but rather like something had bumped into Apollo. I checked the 3D cameras, checking the side at which I felt the collision. I caught a glimpse of a tail, floating off into the darkness. It looked rigid and crustacean-like, shaped almost like an ace of spades. As I tried to make sense of it, another bump came from above. Whatever these things were, they were strong. Not strong enough to break through titanium, but strong enough to move the vessel a solid foot. I checked the cameras again, this time seeing a pair of legs. They looked like they came from some sort of insect, akin to the legs of a spider, but thicker and with barbs. Once again it floated into the darkness. Once again a hit came, this time targeting the pilot's chamber, scaring the piss out of me. I didn't need to check the cameras. The thing hit my window, and it didn't move from my view. I was completely stuck, entranced by what could only be described as a miracle of nature. A living fossil, floating in front of me, locking its round, pure black eyes with me, practically hypnotizing me to admire its sheer beauty, was a massive, yellowish tan, prehistoric creature. A Eurypterid, commonly known by paleontologists and biologists as a sea scorpion. I was dumbfounded. Sea scorpions had gone extinct over 250 million years ago, when the Great Dying happened, otherwise known as the Permian extinction event. Eurypterids were completely wiped out by this, so I was at a loss of words. No words could ever describe what I was feeling. I think it was admiring me back. It surely hadn't seen humans before. It tilted its insecty head at me, wondering what I was. Suddenly more of them came to the window, dumbfounded at what they were seeing. Baby sea scorpions sat atop what I assumed was their mothers, analyzing and internalizing what I was. I began taking photographs of the sea scorpions and sent them to my supervisor. He beamed back to me on the intercom as the cheers of my colleagues rang out in the background. "This is an amazing find. Do you see anything else?" "Not right now, but I'll update you if I do." As I resigned from the intercom once again, the sea scorpions continued to look at me. They almost seemed to gawk at me, as I did the same to them. Suddenly they all cleared, and a much larger, older-looking one got up to the glass. My submersible had arms, grabbers used to move away debris and rocks/minerals. It moved its shelled body to the arms, rubbing up against it, before lowering its head to show me a large parasite that had binded to it. I was confused as to what it was incentivizing, until finally I understood that it wanted me to remove the thing. The arms were not surgical, but fortunately, the parasite was big, meaning the arms could hopefully remove it. I knew it was risky, and if I accidentally killed it, I could be in massive trouble. However, somewhere deep within me, I knew it was desperate. So, as carefully as I could, I maneuvered the arms to reach the critter. It was very much like piloting a claw machine, with every movement a stressor on my psyche. Finally, I had a good grip on the parasite, with the other arm holding the elder sea scorpion's head steady, and with one good tug, the little thing came right off. The sea scorpion jolted, shaking its head in what I could only assume was pain. Yet once the pain subsided, it looked happy, spinning in place with an upbeat pattern. It got back up to the window, and with a happy, almost animal-like bunt against Apollo, it descended back into the depths, with the rest of its family unit following it. With that experience over, I descended further, my mind straight and my heart beating with just a little more pride. I reported the encounter with my staff who, when shown photos, absolutely thrilled. Fortunately, my supervisor was happy with me and green-lighted the further descent. The sonar continued to prove my suspicion, with the cave proving to be a worthwhile endeavor for the entire NOAA. Eventually I reached the middle of the cave, when the radar came back to life. Something was approaching the ship again, something absolutely gigantic. It must have been at least 60 feet in length. Now, I was someone who generally despised people who promoted the idea of Megalodon living in the trench. However, seeing the radar blip with a massive white dot, you can't blame me for being scared of whatever was approaching. I had already seen a literal living fossil, and I wasn't against the idea of a massive monster being down here anymore. However, my fears were calmed as I realized how slow it was moving. Hell, it might as well have been sitting still. I entered the intercom again to my supervisor, who told me to move towards it. Despite my fears, curiosity got the best of me, and I moved towards the blip. In the darkness, I couldn't see a damn thing, so I began to brace myself for a collision just in case. But I never reached it, not before it let out a deep, loud, and inundating shockwave of noise. It sounded like a whale's call, but significantly louder and with more bass. My head rung from the sound, my heart nearly exploding out of sheer terror and anxiety. Suddenly the lights came face to face with the source of the noise. Thinking back on it now, humans really are tiny in comparison to some things. We are the apex predator, but we definitely aren't the top dogs in some areas. Size is definitely one of them. In front of Apollo was a gigantic fish, bony and large. Its head looked like it was made exclusively from bone, armored and rigid. The rest of its figure slowly came into view, its large body unveiling itself to the light. Another living fossil, a large, healthy, and majestic fish. The behemoth paid me no mind, its gargantuan body regarding me with no more than what felt like a simple look. Of course, I began taking photos, and sent them to my supervisor. The intercom shot to life again, and the ovation of my peers could be heard once more. Eventually its large, scaly torso moved into the darkness, never to be seen again. I was given the green light to go further down, but I realized after 3 seconds of descent that I finally reached the bottom. It was different than the Challenger Deep. It was gray in color, with little to no sand on its surface. Jagged scars permeated from its surface, scattered across a variety of areas. What was interesting was that the bottom felt soft, almost like it was a cushion rather than rock. I began talking to my supervisor, discussing what the next move was. He wanted to explore the place further, to see if any other living fossils existed down here. I couldn't blame him. Everything we knew about the ocean and its inhabitants had been flipped on its head. It was amazing. As I began to move forward, something odd happened. The ground beneath me began to vibrate a bit. At first I attributed it to shifting plates, but then out of nowhere, the ground moved completely, nearly knocking over Apollo. Suddenly the radar blipped a dot out, but it wasn't a dot at all. The white blip I would have usually seen encompassed almost the entire radar circle, as if the entire area around me was a living organism. I then did a sonar scan, and saw what my mind had been trying to suppress ever since the radar did what it did. What could only be described as a leviathan was moving, and this movement was occurring right beneath me. What I had landed on wasn't ground. It was a living thing, and I had just woke it up. In my panic, I tried to turn on the intercom, but it wouldn't even go. The station I had been using to communicate with my team had been taken completely off the system, so I did the only thing left: get the hell out. I began piloting the submersible out of Dodge, moving it as fast as it could go. Suddenly Apollo stopped completely. Her engine was on, but she wouldn't budge. I checked the sonar, and I wasn't stuck on anything. It simply wouldn't budge. The intercom then came on, and my supervisor's voice was replaced by a loud, yellowing and deep voice. "No, stay." I was completely frozen, my mind a jumble of fear, shock, and confusion. Was it talking to me? I slowly shot the intercom back on. "Who are you?" I stammered out, my voice a complete mess of sounds and obvious nervousness. The creature bellowed back, its voice calm yet commanding. "I am not a who. Even if I were, it does not matter." My mind began jumbling thoughts, many associated with how on earth this thing was speaking English, or, for that matter, speaking at all. "Why are you here? How did you find this place?" I responded truthfully. I am a marine explorer. A shift in Earth's sea crust opened up a hole beyond what we thought was the deepest point of Earth. I was tasked with going in. I couldn't see it, and thank God I couldn't. It probably would have given me a heart attack, but I could tell it was thinking of what to say. "Are you here to harm or to heal?" I was scared to answer, but I had helped that sea scorpion earlier. I thought that, if what I believed was my life being on the line, telling this deep sea monster I had helped it would be useful. "Earlier I encountered some Eurypterids. I helped this elder one with a parasite." It intook my words and responded back, "Thank you." In the calming nature of its voice, I eased slightly, my mind gaining some clarity to ask it further questions. What is this place?" I asked. The creature didn't respond for a while, but after what felt like eons, it finally spoke up. "Many, many years ago, long before your species ever walked this planet, species of different eras managed to survive their respective calamities. The Europterids, as you call them, were not suited for their new world, so I called upon them to descend to this cavern, instilling them with an increased strength and tolerance for the conditions here. As time passed, more water-dwelling creatures came, and now they reside here. I am the guardian of this place, my purpose solely to defend and protect the nature here." I was at a loss of words. This thing, whatever it was inherently some sort of underwater deity. I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around the concept before it spoke through the intercom again. "You shouldn't be here." I snapped out of my thoughts, and upon hearing this, I became more confused than ever. I guess it could understand what I was thinking, because it fired up the intercom again. "You and your congregation are benevolent, but the rest of your kind is not. They pillage, loot, and destroy the ecosystem above. Many recent underwater creatures have come here, and they speak of you and your species' mayhem. I will seal this hole again, and you are not to ever return here. Do not tell any of your kind of my existence, and leave with the knowledge you have now, but no more." I understood. It was right, unfortunately. "I see," I muttered. The beast did not speak through the intercom this time, only making an incomprehensibly loud bellow that, if anywhere else, could have most likely took down a whole city through decibels alone. Before I began to comply and go ahead and ascend, one more question entered my mind. "How did you end up here?" The intercom stayed silent for the longest time, before it echoed to life for the last time of my journey. "Some secrets are best left secrets." A part of me was slightly annoyed at this, but I understood, and so I began my ascent. After resurfacing, my colleagues bombarded me with questions, demanding to know why I had basically gone off the grid. My supervisor was majorly pissed, but at the end of the day, none of it mattered. The next day, in the dead of night, I went back to my post on the station to see if the hole had closed, and sure enough, it did. I don't think I'll ever forget my experiences in the deep, and to be frank, who could? It was a jarring experience, and one that I think I'll never be able to truly comprehend. The media couldn't get it either, as the images of modern-day prehistoric monsters have swept through the internet like wildfire, with every site on the web talking about how interesting this truly is. If another crack forms, or Earth cuts open again and we find another one of these, however, I will not go back, for I still don't know what it was, and I don't want to find out. My wife Anna passed close to my son's 7th birthday. She was off visiting her family in Mexico and suddenly fell ill. About 72 hours from her showing the initial symptoms, we were told she'd passed away. I can't properly describe how devastating it was. I'm not going to go into that. Not here. I've lived in Guatemala my whole life. Well, I've been both north and south of the border a couple of times. There had always been something pulling me back to my home country. Anna and I had lived in Antigua ever since Gaspar was born, but we'd always talked about moving to the East Coast. She was born there, and it always seemed like a nice place to raise kids. Now, we only had time to have one child, but I was going to give him the best life I could afford. I mean, it's not like we didn't try to have more. Things just didn't work out that way. I could still see her whenever I saw my boy. He had her eyes and her brown hair. I couldn't look at him without remembering the promises we'd made. So a couple of months after Anna passed, I packed our things and moved. No more waiting. If you continue northeast past Puerto Barrios, there is a small coastal town. You know you're getting there when the road turns to dirt and the jacaranda trees grow taller. It's like nature knows people gotta stay longer in the sun. So the branches reach a little further and the shade grows a little thicker. I'd grown up working with boats, so it was easy enough to get a job. A couple of folks knew Anna's family, so I had a foot in the door before they even met me. I got a cheap house made of beautiful smooth white stone, and one wall which was just raw exposed brick. It really reflected the town, stunningly beautiful, from the right angle. We moved in on short notice. The house had been empty since the previous owner passed, and the surviving family decided to sell it off. It was nice enough, but you could tell there was more history to it than you might be comfortable with. Little notches on the floor, subtle stains on the walls, a kitchen where the smell of fried fish wouldn't go away. It wasn't unpleasant, just different. Anna's death had been hard on everyone. I had to keep up appearances and focus on Gaspar. But now that I was settling into a new routine, things were changing fast. Gaspar was starting school and getting to meet all new friends. I guess, in a way. I was supposed to do that too. It's silly worrying about whether your work colleagues are gonna like you or not, but it can make or break your social life. And at my age, what little social life you have is precious. As I got used to the new town, I spent a lot of time by the sea. Boats would come and go at all hours of the day. There was this one station by the pier open 24 hours a day where everyone was registered, meaning there was always some disinterested teenager sitting in the booth, waiting to sign a sheet of paper. I think the smell was the hardest to get used to. Salt and fish and foam. Sick, sweet, and salt, all hitting you at different angles like the southpaw of a skillful boxer. On my first day of work, I was early enough to watch the first fisherman pull into the pier. A tired man in his early 50s pulled a cart with 4 coolers. Waving at the tired kid in the booth, he sat down on the bench next to me. Maybe he was overworked, or a little drunk. But I could tell he wasn't all right. He looked over at me with deep bags under his eyes. "You're new," he stated matter-of-factly. "I am," I said. "I fix boats." "Good," he nodded. "Only reason mine floats is because it's too crap for the ocean to eat." "She's not a picky eater," I smiled. "What?" "I said she's not a picky eater," I repeated. "You know, the ocean." "Don't talk like you know her, Cuate," he said, giving me a cold look. "You don't know her like I do. Don't pretend you do." "I'm just making conversation." "And I'm here to make a good one," he said, pointing a finger at me. "Don't think you can figure this place out in a couple days. There's history in this land. There's bones in that sea. You understand?" "I get you," I said. "I respect that." The man got up and dragged his cart along. smacking the side of the wall of a nearby house. Someone was already up to meet him, but they didn't seem too happy about it. I watched two young women help carry the coolers inside, talking to him with tired smiles, and he just waved them off. "Don't mind Simon," someone said. "He's crazy." I turned around and recognized my employer, Lino. He'd stood there for a while just to see what I was up to. I got up in a flash, reaching out to shake his hand. He accepted it with a smile. "He's 30 years older than he looks," Lino continued. "Been a grumpy old man since he was a kid, they say." "I don't mind grumpy," I smiled. "That's what towns are made of, right?" "Yeah," Lino grinned. "So let's hope we get to be grumpy old men too." Lino's workshop felt like someone's living room. Pictures on the walls, music playing on the speakers, equal smells of motor oil and Ron Zacapa. Lino was an absolute treasure of a person. If "don't worry, be happy" had a face, it'd be him. He had a green shirt that was older than my kid, and this sort of ill-kept handlebar mustache that he kept stroking when he tried to keep a serious face. I couldn't help but think he looked like a tanner Freddie Mercury, minus the teeth. We worked on the engine of a private boat that day. Leisure type stuff. Not anything big and functional. Someone came in saying the engine kept stalling. Lino figured they'd been getting too close to shore and kept getting trash stuck in the propeller, but I convinced him to do a thorough check. We found some engine tearing that might lead to a complete breakdown in a couple more runs, so we fixed it. It was quick and cheap, and Lino charged next to nothing for it despite it costing us half a day to work through. "You make people who can afford a boat like this happy. They don't ever go somewhere else," he said. "It's not just making friends, it's good business." By the end of our first day, we stopped outside the workshop to have a smoke. I hadn't smoked since I met Anna, but I didn't see the point to stick to that anymore. One puff and I got the coughs. Lino picked up on it, but decided not to ask. Instead, he pointed at a shed just off the pier. "You see that?" he said. "Take a look. Tell me what you see." "A shed," I said. "Cheap roofing." "No. See what's on the roof?" I looked a little closer. "Two seagulls?" "That's right," Lino said. "Two seagulls. Now, have you noticed something strange about them?" "Other than not pooping on me? No." "Yeah, but that's just the thing. There are gulls everywhere. Listen." I took another puff of smoke, letting it coat my lungs and simmer into my nerves. I turned my head up and closed my eyes. All I could hear was the pulse of the ocean and the clatter of everyday life coming from the buildings around us. I couldn't hear the gulls. "They're silent around here," Lino said. "You won't hear them screaming or attacking. They don't do that." "BS." "No, I'm serious," he smiled. "They say so many people died at sea that even the gulls stopped laughing about it." "They say that, huh?" "Well, Simon does." Lino nodded. "But he loves those things, so he should know. You can see him feeding them before he goes out every night." I didn't question it. Grumpy people tend to prefer the company of animals. There was a place right next door to the workshop where I could get some cheap tapato, so I bought some for me and Gaspar. I took the long road back home, getting acquainted with the streets and those who lived there. A couple of folks gave me crooked looks and folded arms, but others waved and cheered as I passed. It would take some time, but I could see them warming up to me. By the time I got to the street, I noticed something. There were seagulls all over the roof, looking down on me. About 30 of them all in all. It was true what Lino said. They'd been unusually quiet. I'd never seen a seagull that hadn't screeched and whooped. But these were different somehow. As I approached, I could see them gathering at the edge of the roof, looking down on me. Gaspar was already home, waiting by the door. Before I got a chance to greet him, one of the gulls opened its mouth and screamed. One by one they joined in. It wasn't the usual cackling of seagulls. It was more of a laugh, a stunted, stuttered laugh. Gaspar and I had dinner in the living room, watching cartoons on the TV. I asked him about school, but he was too shy to talk about it. He wasn't really a fan of the soup I'd bought, but I promised he'd get used to it. There were so many other things to try too. If we ask nicely, I bet we can go out on a boat, I said. I think you'd like it. It's nice out there. I don't like the ocean, he said. It's too big, scary. That's what makes it great. You can swim for hours and there's always something new to see. I prefer YouTube. He finished up and hunkered down in his room. I sat down in the kitchen, popped open a gallo, and took the load off my feet. But even then, I noticed a gull on the fence outside, staring right into my kitchen window. And the moment our eyes met, it laughed, and not in the way that gulls usually do. The following morning, after I sent Gaspar to school, I met Simon by the pier again. He had 5 coolers that morning. A successful trip, it seemed. He sat down on the same bench, sighed, and gave me a tired side-eye. He didn't have much to say, so I decided to take the lead on this one. They say you know the gulls, I said. Is that true? You better believe it, he nodded. They're my children. So what does it mean when they laugh at you? He turned to me, his expression growing concerned. They laugh at you? Yeah, a bunch of them did yesterday. Means you got misery coming, Cuate. They got you with the Rises del Mar. They sensed something. The laugh of the sea. Simon even had a name for it. They sense that darkness in you, Cuate. You can hide it from the rest, but you're not fooling my gulls. They're gonna laugh at you. Why'd they do that? Maybe they want you to chin up. Maybe you're bringing my gulls down. Maybe they don't think you belong. Could be a lot of things. He got up with a grunt and grabbed his cart. Without looking back, he ended the conversation. You think you belong here? He chuckled. You think this is meant for you? I had no answer, and in the distance, a gull laughed. I spent a couple of days working with Lino to get into the rhythm of things. Just like he'd said, the rich client came back with another boat. This one was more of a touch-up job rather than a pure fix. We just looked it over, cleaned it a bit, and called it a day. Took us just a couple of hours, and paid more than the last job 2 times over. We took some time working with the local fishermen. Quick fixes, mostly. Lino introduced me to half the town. I got told more names than I could count. One guy, son of another guy, cousin to a third guy. There was the dumb guy with the hot sister, the even dumber guy who married her. This was a town of stories and lives, and I was jumping straight into it with both feet at once. I stepped out of that workshop feeling lighter than I'd been in weeks. There was that glimpse of something new, that maybe, if I worked hard, I could make a life for myself. Then I peered up at the rooftops, and there the gulls sat, laughing. I felt my smile fade. They could see past it all. They could see and laugh at my pain. It was there, hidden under a vain attempt at fitting in. Don't let them get to you, compa, Lino said. It's just birds. But it wasn't that easy. I'd hear them every morning as I went to work. I'd see them on the rooftops, looking down on me. They never laughed at anyone else. Not Simon, not Lino, not the dumb guy with the hot sister. No one. Just me. The risa del mar. The laugh of the sea. Maybe Misery didn't love company. Maybe she just lives by the coast. Sometimes the gulls would get louder. Sometimes the gulls would get louder. Whenever I stubbed a toe or stalled an engine, they'd laugh even harder. I would be so prepared to hear them that I'd get distracted, which would just cause more misfortune. I once tried bribing them, putting out a bowl of cooked, unsalted rice. They wouldn't touch it. They just circled it, picked at it, and laughed. I'd never seen a bird reject a free meal. One night as I went to bed, I thought about the people that used to live in that house. They'd slept in that room too, coloring it with their little dreams and hopes. I could almost see myself in 30 years, just like they did, laying in that same room, dreaming the same dreams. But in those moments, the space next to me felt colder than ever. I missed Anna with every breath of every day, but in those cold hours of the night, it just hurt a little more. And in those moments of weakness, where a tear might chase its way down my eyes, I'd hear the gulls outside laughing. "Please stop," I'd whisper into my pillow. "Please stop laughing." That just made them laugh harder, louder. "I've done you nothing. Please." But they didn't stop. They'd laugh all night, hoping to wound me for just a little longer. Lino had a slightly different view of things. He and the other locals stuck to this one saying that would slip out every now and then. El que mucho se asante pronto deja de hacer falta. Or, he who is often absent stops being missed. You have to put yourself out there if you want to be part of things. So instead of wallowing in self-pity, I was gonna have to put myself on the line. Now, Lino never once asked me about Anna and our lives together. He'd heard a little about it, and he knew better than to ask. So instead, he just did his best to bring me along. Fishing trips with some of his cousins, late nights at the bars watching sports and drinking rum. Gaspar would stay at a friend's house. He was quicker to pick up friends than me, I figured. Lino would introduce me to single women my age, but back off when he realized I wasn't ready. But with every step forward, there'd be that long walk home at night, and every single time, there'd be a gull, laughing its heart out, reminding me that at the end of it all, that room would be as dark as ever, as cold as ever, dead. There was one morning when I hadn't slept that well. As I ran into Simon, the gulls were at full force, circling me, laughing from up high. I snapped at Simon as he came by, pulling his carts. Just 3 coolers that morning. "What do I gotta do?" I asked. "How long are they gonna laugh at me?" "You getting mad at the birds, Guate?" Simon had the same laugh as the gulls. Maybe they got it from him. "I'm serious," I said. "This is ridiculous." "You blame the mirror for making you ugly, too?" "Shut up." He stopped for a moment and looked at me, shaking his head. "You know the last one the gulls laughed at?" he asked. "Same woman that lived in that house of yours, not long before she died." "You trying to scare me?" "Ask anyone," he continued. "Right before she died, they were all over her. And her husband? Who knows? He never left the house. You'd forget he even lived there." "So what are you trying to say? That I'm about to die?" Simon rolled his eyes and grabbed his cart. "I'm telling you to stop being weak," he snapped back. "Have a drink, cut your hair, kiss a woman." He flicked a couple of coins at me as he wandered off, still laughing, just like the gulls. That day turned out awful, just awful. I broke an expensive spare part and cut my palm on a sharp knife. When Lino came over to help, I turned him away. I didn't even think about it. Even though my ears couldn't hear them, my heart echoed with the shrieking laughter of the gulls. The Risa del Mar. When I sat down to clear my head, Lino joined me, giving me some time to calm down. "You know the people who lived in that house before me?" I asked. "Lady de Leon?" He asked. "Yeah, I remember her." "Simon says the gulls laughed at her before she died." "Yeah, I remember," he said. "Can't say it was a big surprise. She was ancient, but we miss her." "What about her husband?" Lino raised an eyebrow at that. Then he nodded, as if a light had come on in the back of his mind. "Right," he said. "I forget about him sometimes. He never left the house, but you could see his stupid red hat in the windows." "Did he die too?" "I suppose he did." Lino nodded. "I can't remember." Coming home that evening, I anticipated the gulls sitting in a row along the roof laughing at me. They knew I'd had a bad day, and they weren't about to let me forget it. But they weren't there. The house was empty, not a single gull, not a hint of a laugh. It was nice in a way. It showed me a home the way it was meant to be seen. I wouldn't dread going to sleep that night, but I still felt like something was off. For all the unease those birds brought me, there was something stranger about them suddenly going away. Had I done something wrong? "Gaspar?" I called out. "I'm making shrimp. You want coconut rice or the usual?" There was no response. I walked out into the hallway looking around. He wasn't in the living room, not in the backyard either. By the time I dug through his room, I could feel my pulse rising. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't coming out. I called out and there was no response. "Gaspar?" I kept calling, but he wasn't out back or out front. He wasn't coming down the road. I expected his voice, but got only echoes of mine. He should have been home by now, and the seagulls were gone. I called his school, but he wasn't there. I asked for the name of his friend, so I could see if he stayed with them for dinner, but I got an unusual response. "What friend?" Turns out, Gaspar had been having trouble in school. He had trouble relating to the other kids, and they had trouble fitting him into groups. He wouldn't get into fights, but he would blend into the background. They'd forget he was even there. I called every kid in his class, asking if they'd seen my boy. Most of them didn't know his name. No one had seen anything. He just put on his backpack and wandered off, like every other day. Or so they thought. They couldn't remember for sure. Finally, I turned to Lino. I asked him to reach out to everyone he knew. "My boy is missing," I stuttered. "You must help me. I must find him." "You have a kid?" he asked. "Of course. He's Gaspar, my boy." "You never talk about him," Lino said. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "I have a son," I emphasized. "I'll make some calls. What does he look like?" I looked at one of the pictures on the wall. Gaspar, Anna, and me. It was blurry, sun-bleached. "Brown hair," I said. "He has brown hair." "What else?" I didn't have an answer. For some reason, I couldn't think of anything. Not his eyes, not his smile. I could barely even imagine his voice. I hung up on Lino and looked out the window. A single gull sat on the fence outside, its head cocked to the side. They weren't laughing anymore. If anything, it seemed concerned. I drove around town asking anyone and everyone if they'd seen him. A boy walking around with a backpack, looking lost or scared. No one had seen him, heard him, nothing. Finally, I drove by this run-down little one-story house, its walls patched with driftwood planks and sheet metal. It was impossible not to recognize the man swaying back and forth in a hammock on the porch. Simon, listening to his radio. I stopped. I wanted to ask him if he'd seen my boy, but I knew the answer already. Instead, I got out of my car and called out to him. "Did you ask them to do this?" I yelled. "Is this you?" "Is this what?" He yelled back. "What do you want?" "You don't like me, so now the gulls don't like me, and now my boy is gone." Simon rolled out of his hammock and turned off the radio. He gave me a curious look, not angry, concerned, like the gulls. "He didn't come home. I can't find him," I continued. "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, Simon." "They laugh at pain, Kwate," he said. "Pain is for those who are still there. Those who are gone don't suffer anymore." "Stop it with the riddles," I snapped. "I'll make you swallow your teeth. Just tell me what they did to my boy." Simone picked something up from the side of his hammock and walked over to me. Still not angry, he looked up at the sky. "I don't think they were laughing, Kwate," he said. "I think they were trying to warn you." "That's not what you said. You said they laugh at my pain." "Two things can be true, you know. They're birds. They're not complicated. But you know what I think?" He took a swig from a bottle and pointed eastward. A long line of gulls could be seen in the distance, circling something. "Maybe they're waiting for you," he said. "Pay attention. Listen." I got back in my car, trying to see the gulls. It was a weird angle, but I could hang my head out the window if necessary. Simone knocked on my window. "No," he said. "They're going out to sea." He opened the car door and held out a hand. "We'll take my boat." Simone's boat was in desperate need of a touch-up. He'd been stubborn about getting it fixed, but I could hear the engine struggling the moment it puttered away from the pier. We were heading east, where the gulls still circled. I had a moment of doubt. I'd been projecting my insecurities on these birds for weeks at this point. What if I was still doing it? But no, that wasn't it. Despite it all, I could tell Simone had his heart in the right place. When it hits the fan, you don't want the person who tells you everything is gonna be okay. You want the one who spits on the problem and says, "Let's get this done." The sun was setting, slowly but surely. A stiff breeze rattled the buttons on my pale orange shirt. I couldn't smell the ocean anymore. I'd gotten used to it. Something hit the boat. Maybe a rock, or a sudden push from a wave. Simone tried to keep us straight, but it was too late. I fell overboard, plunging into the dark. For those who haven't swum in the open sea, there's nothing quite like it. An eternal mix of emerald blue in every direction, turning into a shimmering orange as the sun sets. In the distance, you might see a few spots swimming about, only to realize they're fish the size of your hand. But down there, it all looks small, even you. And don't look down. At the best of times, you see the immense darkness, sucking you down, and in the worst of cases, you see something coming up. I forced my head above the surface. The sun had already set. A mild fog was settling over the ocean surface. I couldn't see anything. Left, right, it was all just water. Waves pushing me in every direction, grabbing a hold of me. I could feel a chill reaching up to spill the warmth in my chest. My toes were already tingling. As I kicked, one of my shoes came off. tumbling downward like a slow leaf in the wind, rocked by invisible currents. I called out to Simone, but I could barely hear my voice over the waves. There was no way he'd hear me over the engine. Then again, I couldn't even hear him anymore. He must have kept going, or sunk. But I could hear something else. Seagulls. I listened and swam until my arms ached. My eyes burned from the salt. I could feel my legs taking longer and longer to kick as my head dipped further under the surface. I had trouble getting my mouth up. I swallowed a mouthful of salt water as my rhythm broke, and in another 2 kicks, I was submerged. I counted to 30, kicking as hard as I could. Then, out of nowhere, my toes touched sand. I pulled my way onto a long deserted beach. Not a bird among the trees, no insects in the bushes. A steady wind pulled on the leaves of the blue sunflowers resting under the sweet gum trees, making them rattle like a dry applause. Then I saw people, just a couple of them standing further in by the tree line. Dark, tired eyes, lips so chapped they looked like leather, a man with a broken shirt hanging off his left shoulder, a middle-aged woman in a folk dress. As I approached, they stepped back. "I need help," I wheezed. "I need to find my boy." They didn't say a word. I took a couple steps forward and they faded into the dark, disappearing into the shade of the trees. They left no footsteps in the sand. There were so many more. The further I went and the closer I looked, I saw them. Quiet people, looking on from afar. If I got too close, they'd step away. If I stopped to look, they did the same. Dark, tired eyes, asking me silent questions. Some of them looked old, not in age, but in clothes. 100 years, 200 years, maybe 1,000. One of them was an old man with an unusual red bucket hat. I looked a little closer but couldn't figure out what he reminded me of. Perhaps I forgot. I'd been so preoccupied with my own troubles and woes that I hadn't considered Gaspar. I hadn't stopped to make sure he was okay. Much like the rest of town, and even his school, I'd forgotten about him. Maybe that's what the gulls were laughing at. Not me messing up another social faux pas with Lino and the boys, but me forgetting to check in on my boy. "I'm sorry, Anna," I muttered as I dragged my feet through the cooling sand. One shoe missing. I was just looking at me. It was just about me. I forgot. There was a fire up ahead, a campfire on the beach. Stepping closer, I could see 2 people sitting on a log, staring into the flames. A tall man and a boy. I recognized neither. I was having trouble focusing on the man. One moment he was tall and slim, the other he was short and fat. He was young, he was old. He was handsome, he was ugly. He would shift and turn as if to change whenever I thought I had an idea of what he looked like he refused to be what I expected. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The words didn't come from him. Instead, they came from the tree line. A dozen dialects all at once. A single chorus of voices. "I cannot care for you," they said. "I'm looking for someone," I said. "I don't need you to care." "Who are you looking for?" A cacophony, struggling voices, having been dormant for years. I'd hear them fight to remember the words and to roll their stiff tongues. "My boy," I said. "I'm looking for my boy." "Is this him?" they asked. I looked at the boy by the fire. I couldn't say. I couldn't place him in my mind. I could only remember what I'd said about him, or what others had said. I could remember Anna telling me how she loved his curly brown hair, but I couldn't picture it. I care for him, they said. I do not forget. The voices crackled, breaking into monotones. They left me in the woods, a man said. I slept in the mountains. No one came to find me, said another. I fell over. They kept going. There were hammerheads in the water. They never asked my name. People abandoned, forgotten, sacrificed, left to die by the side of the road or stuck in a mountain crevice. If he is here, you must find him, the choir said. Will you look? I will look, I agreed. I'll look anywhere. You may have to stay for long, they said, until perhaps you are forgotten too. I don't care. Good. In the blink of an eye, I was along a country road. My leg was broken. I was screaming for help, but no one came. The flies wouldn't stop gathering on my face, picking at dry blood, pain, desperation. They should have been there hours ago, but they forgot. Bleeding through the night, passing from warmth to cold to warmth again, serenaded to the other side by whispering insects. Then, watching a boat disappear on the horizon, my legs growing weak, the waves growing higher. They must have noticed I was gone. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't care. Movement in the dark creeping closer. Something brushing up against my leg. Something with rough skin. A single eye reflecting the moonlight as a hammerhead shark waits for me to die. Life after life after life. All forgotten. And at the end of every final breath, the gulls laughed in the distance, trying to make the others see, to listen, to remember. It was ceaseless, relentless. In one moment I'm drinking myself to death, hoping someone would find me in a bathtub. In the next I'm outside a bar with a knife in my gut. I'm in the corner of a burning building, but the fireman forgot to look for me. Death after death after death. But I have to keep going. Then, a boy. He didn't want his dad to worry, so he said he would stay with a friend. Instead, he hid in his room, looking at pictures of his mother. He made his own bed, cooked his own dinner. It would be okay. He rarely left the house. He skipped school most days. But there was no point for him to learn, since he couldn't picture a future anyway. He'd get by somehow, or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe it didn't matter. Another voice joining the choir of things that didn't need to be. It was a cruel twist of fate. I couldn't remember him no matter how hard I tried, and even if I knew in my heart of hearts he was among them, I couldn't picture him. But I could remember Anna, and thinking of her eyes and her hair, I could remember him too. I remembered her words, whispering his name as she cradled him, and with those sprinkles of thought, a picture started to form, a name, a shape, a voice. He's afraid of the sea, I said. He'd rather watch YouTube. Is that okay? Asked the boy by the fire. Yeah, I sobbed. That's okay. We can watch together. I took him by the hand. The people in the dark stepped aside. The man by the fire remained silent, watching as we went. And in the distance the gulls laughed, not out of menace or spite, but out of relief. It hasn't been an easy life since then. Both Gaspar and I had healing to do. We had to start talking openly about Anna and the life we would expect without her. It was painful, but necessary. We talked about where we'd celebrate the holidays, where we'd go on holiday, and instead of presuming, or hoping. We talked about it, and we made plans. Maybe he'd have a new mother someday. Maybe he'd even have a little brother or sister to play with. He said he'd like that. Whenever I was ready to try, I would have his blessing. I took him out with Simone's boat once. I helped fix it up a bit first. The man is saltier than the sea, but he's honest. I'm surprised how much Gaspar likes him. I think Simone had a soft spot for Gaspar, too. Maybe kids are like gulls in a way. Simple. The gulls don't laugh no more. Not for me. Not for anyone. Now when Simone goes to feed them, I sit next to him. Gaspar does too. And they humbly accept whatever we offer. Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have a single story upload. You all know that I like to do these from time to time when a story is especially good and also decently long. Tonight we have a story by the name of Have You Ever Played the Would You game? It is written by Let's Split Up, and I would like to give a huge thank you to them for allowing me to share this story with all of you. If you do enjoy this video, please be sure to drop a like rating. It helps out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Would you cut off your pinky to get $1 million? Would you kill your cheating spouse to marry the man of your dreams? Would you eat a dog turd to win a year's supply of ice cream? These are the sorts of preposterous questions that make up the Would You game, which is like a deranged cousin of the Would You Rather board game. But unlike the popular board game, the Would You game has real-world stakes. Stakes as high as life or death, or even higher. I found this out the hard way with my sister, Seti. Her actual name is September, but everyone calls her Seti, just like everyone calls me Toby. My actual name is October. And yes, we do hate our parents for this. Seti was always competitive, even when she was very little. But I didn't understand how competitive until she invented the Would You game. We played during boring summers at home. In the beginning, it was just Seti, me, our older sister Jules, July, but everyone calls her Jules, and her best friend, Darren. Darren is the one who added cards to the game, Structure. He was kind of a nerd and liked board games, though he only reluctantly played them with me and Seti, whom he found too young and competitive. The game as it exists today is largely Darren's construction. There are 7 cards, always dealt in order. Would you risk verb, risk noun, to reward verb, reward noun? For example, would you kill your roommate to cure cancer? Most of the time, the randomness of the cards led to absurd sentences, less like truth or dare and more like Mad Libs. Points were earned through guesses, with fellow players trying to guess whether you would or would not. Often the fun of the game revolved around players justifying their choices, as in, sure, eating a dog turd would be gross, but 2 minutes of gross is worth a full year of delish. It was silly, harmless fun. The fact the game turned into something horrifying is my fault. I knew even at the time I shouldn't have done what I did, but I was furious with Seti. She'd pulled, would you lick a cockroach, to get a day home from school, and she said yes. Seti says yes to everything, I pointed out. It's ridiculous. She's lying. She wouldn't do any of these things. I would, Seti, about 7 years old at the time, balled her fists. She was trying very hard to be cool enough to play with her older siblings and keep up with us. You wouldn't, I snapped, sick of her lying. We went back and forth, and finally I declared I was adding a new rule. The challenge rule. Any player could challenge another player, and then the challenge player would have to do the thing they'd said yes to. If they did, the player who'd made the challenge had to give the reward. A day home from school meant I'd cover for her with our parents. Seti's face immediately took on a pink cast. She clearly hadn't anticipated my making up this rule. I, cruel older sibling that I was, challenged her then to lick the cockroach. It wasn't nice, I admit. Tears came into her eyes. She looked at me in disbelief. Seti always looked up to me, idolized me. I'd like to say that in the moment, I regretted what I was doing to her, but at the time, I was just gloating. But little Seti wouldn't be beaten either. Darren went and got a cockroach. He and Jules really should have been chaperoning better, but Darren was just gleeful at the idea of anyone licking a cockroach. He pulled a dead one from one of the traps and laid it out on a napkin in front of her. Seti's lower lip quivered. Her big eyes lifted to mine. Then she leaned forward, squinching her eyes, and stuck her tongue out. The pink tip touched the roach. She licked it, declared Darren, delighted, even as Julie cried, "Ew!" and I exclaimed, "Gross!" But now I owed her a day off school. Triumphant, she squashed the dead roach in the napkin and tossed it into the trash. "I win," she said. "Yeah, well, you licked a roach, which means you lose at life," I retorted. "I win," she declared again. From then on, the challenge rule held, but I should have known it was stupid. Dangerous rule to put into play. The next time we played, the very first card Seti flipped had kill written on it. She paused on that card, while Darren's mouth made an O of expense. And Jules and I exchanged troubled glances. Including the kill card was controversial. It sometimes resulted in hilariously absurd combinations, such as, would you kill your butt to become a lost treasure? To an adult, this sort of Mad Libs game is ridiculous. When I was 10, it was hilarious. But of course, the word could also result in some very bad combinations. Seti kept drawing, your sibling, to win this game. She paused, mouth quirking to the side as she considered the cards. "Invalid," declared Jules. No, we can still guess," said Darren, even as Seti slid her answer card. A card that said either yes or no, face down in front of her. "Darren," Jules objected, but Darren was already sliding his card forward as well. Jules and I followed suit, and we all flipped them upright. Darren and Jules had guessed no. My card said yes. I knew my dumb sister, and Seti, hers also said yes. "Knew it," I said, glaring quietly. She smiled back at me serenely. "Come on, BS," Darren said, while Jules elbowed him. But Darren ignored her and growled, "Challenge." "No," said Jules. "Ow, no, we're not." "What?" Darren snapped. "It's in the rules. If she kills Toby, she wins the game." He eyed Seti and said pointedly, "I'm not going to let her win by cheating or bluffing." "Enough," said Jules. My younger sister gathered the cards in front of her, set both her yes and no cards aside, and smoothed her skirt. There was no red face this time, no crying or embarrassment. She stood up, turned to Darren and said, "Well, aren't you silly? Don't you know it's just a game? Come on, Toby. Let's go." Something in my stomach nodded as her fingers intertwined mine. It was a relief to know that despite her competitiveness, my sister could recognize when a thing went too far. Suddenly her arm curved round my neck, yanking me back in a chokehold. I slapped at her arms, fingers clawed and pulled at me as my face went purple, and my windpipe felt crushed and speckles blackened my vision. Then she was off me, hauled back by Darren and Jules as she howled, "Let me go! Let go!" "Seti, stop it!" hollered Jules. Seti was still screeching as they dragged her to her room. "Jesus, she's crazy," growled Darren. Jules declared no more games. "If I kill Toby tonight, I win," panted Seti as they locked her in. "I win. Say that I win." "No one wins, Seti," screamed Jules. "I can't believe I even have to say this. I'm telling Mom and Dad. Why do you have to be so crazy? Christ, the game is suspended. Do you understand me? It's over. There are no winners. And we are never playing this game ever again." So that was the end of the Would You game for many years. Seti found other games to play, of course, less dangerous ones. She was really good at games, and made a fortune with gambling, the lottery, card tournaments, investing. Playing the market was itself a sort of game, she told me. And as with all such ventures, she tackled it with a competitive spirit and almost unmatched skill, though she did suffer some stunning losses occasionally, as a consequence of her tremendous risks. She knew all the tricks of the trade, shuffling tricks, sleight of hand, weighted dice, counting cards. Contrary to what you might believe, she was actually a pretty good sister, most of the time. It was Seti who took care of our parents, making sure their bills were paid and their lawn mowed, and the big house always tidy. She did a lot of the cooking and cleaning herself, before she'd do her makeup and go out for the evening to the casino, or for a drink with business partners. She never went to college, instead keeping house for our parents. But then, she didn't really need college. We had wealth inherited from our grandparents, and Seti multiplied it neatly, managing investments for all of us. She did this with complete transparency and fairness. And while she sometimes gambled heavily with her own money, she never did with ours, always putting it in investments according to our willingness to embrace risk or security. And yet, through my college years, when Seti was finishing high school, she brought back the Would You game, and this time being legally an adult, she had no one to rein her in. I found out about it from Kedar, another boy at her school. He told me how she'd started playing with a group of preppy senior friends. I tried to shrug this off. Whatever. We were all adults now. Surely my sister wouldn't go too crazy, right? It wasn't until later I found out she'd changed the rules again. She and some of the other seniors were playing one day when they decided that the Mad Libs aspect was no longer as entertaining as when we were children, and that players should draw until the cards issued a sentence that the majority agreed made sense. Of course, even then, most of the results were still things that couldn't actually happen, but others, like, would you eat bugs to get a winning lotto ticket, were not only perfectly valid combinations, but also easy enough to both challenge and reward. And this is exactly what happened when Seti and her friends played. One of them claimed he'd eat bugs to get a winning lotto ticket. She challenged. He ate several ants. So Seti bought lotto tickets until she had a winning one. Granted, it was only for $3. But the cards hadn't specified, had they? And that's how it began. Seti herself becoming a grantor of sorts. Anytime she played the game, she had the money after all. Even back then, our family was well off, and Seti already had a considerable sum saved from her gambling and side hustles. I never knew what she did on the side, but I assumed some of it wasn't legal. She could afford to escalate the game, so when a combination came up like, would you dump your boyfriend to earn a new iPhone, Seti could issue the challenge. And when her friend followed through on the dumping, said friend would be gifted with a new phone. It was nonsense, risky, and unhealthy. But not, I guess, more than any other kind of gambling. Until it got worse. Several years later, Seti had some friends over. I'd refused to join. I'd sworn to myself never to play this game. Seti seemed to get even more competitive when I was around, so I kept away from the group, watching from across the living room. Turns kept passing around and everyone was laughing, drinking. A few people were smoking, but that wasn't really my business. Mostly it sounded like absurd stuff. Would you kiss Mrs. Whittinger to save a litter of kittens? Groans. Mrs. Whittinger was the principal at Seti's high school, and in games of kiss, marry, kill, was universally the kill option. Much discussion ensued about whether a litter of kittens would actually die if the player said no to this, and whether the price, having to kiss Mrs. Whittinger, was too high. Seti considered the question, but intertwined her fingers and explained that since the kittens were in the reward deck and not the risk deck, the game would not put kittens in harm's way. In short, kissing will mean you do a good deed, but not kissing won't make you do a bad one, she declared. Thus, if Scott, the player who'd drawn this combination, were to return to their old high school to kiss the loathsome Mrs. Whittinger, a litter of kittens would be rescued, but nothing would happen otherwise. Well, yeah, but if I don't kiss her, some kittens somewhere might not get rescued, so guess I gotta kiss her. Scott grinned at all the groans all around. Challenge, said Seti, almost automatically, almost bored. Scott did indeed end up visiting the high school on a made-up errand, and kissing the principal on the cheek. She was suitably astonished at this affection from a troublesome alum, but also rather touched, and Seti honored her word and awarded Scott by saving a litter of kittens that still occupies our parents' house, where she has devotedly looked after them. But that's not the reason I'm telling you about this game. See, shortly after Scott's draw, another friend, Rosalinda, drew a combination that elicited quite a stir. Would you cut off your finger to gain $1 million? Gasps and whispers all around. Everyone at that party knew that if it was done, Seti could potentially honor the million. This was into her investing years. She had the financial wherewithal for it. And she had granted other gifts before, but never to such an extravagant amount. The most she'd ever given was a gift for a Bahamas trip. I'd totally do it, said Scott. No way, said another friend. No way I'd do that. But $1 million? Said someone else. This one's a hypothetical, right? Said another, glancing tentatively to Seti, who just sat back holding her drink with her eyes glimmering and a lazy smile on her face. Yeah, obviously, said Scott. I mean, who's got $1 million to give? Seti might. Yeah, right. Screw it, said Rosalinda, slamming her cards down. I'm in. Make your picks, people. Everyone voted. Half said yes, half no. Rosalinda flipped her card. Yes. Everyone glanced to Seti, who stood up quietly, moved to the bar to pour herself another drink, and then poured a glass for Rosalinda, too. A glass of strong stuff. She then moved into the kitchen where she opened a drawer. I felt my heart rate increase. Moved to follow Seti, in whose fingers glinted silver. She sterilized the knife over a flame, then brought it to Rosalinda, laying it out on a tray with napkins, bandages, a first aid kit. Rosalinda's eyes grew wide as saucers. Scott whispered, disbelieving. Everyone had gone utterly silent, appalled. I held my breath. Don't, I thought. Don't. What should I have done? Called the police? Even now I wonder. No one was forcing Rosalinda to do anything. And yet, Seti sat back in her cushioned chair, idly swirling the bourbon in her glass before downing it. Her eyes glimmered over a smile as she raised her gaze to Rosalinda and whispered, "Challenge." Everyone was dead still, and then Rosalinda picked up the knife. I'll spare you the description of the aftermath of that. The would you cards had said cut your finger off, but they had said nothing about not sewing it back on. Scott put Rosalinda's finger on ice immediately after she cut it off, to the screams of the other players. There were some accusations that Seti was sick, that this all went too far. Then Rosalinda's friends rushed her and her severed finger to the hospital, where it was reattached. And of course, Rosalinda and her friends were somewhat mollified that, shortly afterwards, $1 million was transferred to her bank account. In fact, when word spread, others began seeking out my sister to play. That was when I put my foot down about playing in this house. I said our parents' house couldn't be turned into a gambling den, that I didn't want murders or maiming under their roof, and them to have to deal with cleaning up blood or whatever sick things happened. Seti agreed to take her games elsewhere. I tried to keep out of her business, but occasionally word leaked from our parents, or Jules, or mutual acquaintances, and it seemed like both the risks and rewards were getting bigger. But when things really got out of hand, when I finally put my foot down that it had to stop, was the first time someone died. Before COVID, the games had involved physical risk, even maiming, but had never included death. I wasn't present for the lethal draw, and only found out later that the combination pulled was, would you become haunted by a terrifying ghost to save your child? This particular game took place over Zoom during the height of the pandemic, among a handful of players who won the chance to play via lottery. Seti's games were in high demand. As it turned out, one of the players had an eldest daughter on a ventilator. Now you'd think that any combination involving a ghost would be inherently invalid. After all, it's not like Seti can conjure up the supernatural. But apparently the players agreed to accept it as a valid draw, and the devoted father played yes. Anything for my kids, he said. I viewed the recording of the Zoom later, and after the father played his yes card, Seti's eyes fluttered for several seconds in this strange way, as if she were in a trance, or listening to something no one else could hear. Then her eyes opened and she declared, "Challenge." A few days later, the daughter recovered. But it wasn't until said daughter messaged me, begging me to intervene, that I understood how deranged the game had become. The man who answered the door in his bathrobe had eyes, red-rimmed from weeping, a week's worth of beard stubbling his gaunt face. Without a word, he let me into his house, and as he shuffled away from me, I noticed burn marks on the walls. Not in any obvious pattern, but here and there marring the wallpaper. He pointed to a pile of framed photographs stacked on the sofa. They'd formerly been hung on the walls, I realized, but he'd taken them down because in every single photo, he had been burned out, leaving the rest of his family intact. That was how the wallpaper had been charred. There was also, I noticed, a burn mark in the shape of a handprint on his arm. While the father wearily offered me tea, I picked up one of the photos, the backing and part of the glass damaged from the heat. Is it just the burn marks, or is other stuff going on? The lights, he whispered as he stirred the tea. The shrieks and banging at night, the handprints, the dreams, and this. He pulled open a drawer full of children's drawings scrawled by his daughter and her siblings, kept from when they were very little. In all the drawings, he had been scratched out, and a blackened figure, like a shadow, seemed to be looming behind him, its hands on his shoulders. She's obviously hired someone to come and do all this, I said. You're probably having nightmares from the stress. No way would I believe that SETI could summon ghosts. But I absolutely believe she had the resources to make a man think she had. The defiled children's drawings especially left me chilled. How had she identified which figure in the child's scrolls was him? I offered to stay the night, to confront whoever SETI had hired and chase them off, and I promised I would contact my sister in the morning and put an end to this so-called haunting. The man seemed relieved by my assurances that all the spooky effects were staged, yet he also requested me not to interfere. He was clearly anxious that if he didn't let things continue, his daughter would fall sick again. I tried to assure him that SETI didn't have that kind of power and couldn't make her relapse, but he insisted I keep out of it. Privately, I decided to speak to SETI anyway. She was overseas, however. The man killed himself before she got back, hung himself from the staircase, leaving his beloved daughter and her siblings to mourn. I waited in our parents' house for my sister the night she returned. She'd barely gotten off the plane a half hour earlier, but despite what must have been a wearying flight, she waltzed through the front door in a glitzy suit like she'd stepped out of Vegas. Seeing me, she spread her arms wide in greeting. "How could you?" I snarled. She dropped her arms, though her smile didn't falter. "Toby, dear, I didn't. Whatever it is you're upset about, it was the cards." "A ghost, SETI?" "A terrifying ghost," she corrected. "Of course it wasn't a ghost, SETI," I bellowed, shaking with fury. The funeral had been 2 days ago. The only terrifying thing here is you, for hounding a man to death. You drove him to this. It's you who fulfills the challenges, who delivers the rewards. Admit it. You paid for his daughter to get special treatment. I looked into it. You couldn't guarantee it, but you did everything you could to make sure she'd recover, didn't you? And when she did, you made him suffer. He had to complete the challenge. She pursed her lips, silent for a moment, then finally said, "What if I did? What if you did?" I couldn't believe her. "SETI, you drove a man to his death." "You said that already." She looked bored. "So, I made a man terrified. He chose to kill himself." "BS, you killed him, as much as if you handed him the rope." "Oh, he chose hanging? SETI?" I paused and added, low and serious, "You have to stop this." That stilled her. She was silent a moment, eyes shadowed by the brim of her hat, crimson lips pursed. Finally, a curl to her mouth. Make me. What? Make me stop, she repeated, and languidly took a chair at the coffee table, indicating for me to do the same. I stared in horror as she pulled out a deck. One game, she declared, eyes glittering. A duel. You win, I stop and never play again. You can have your wish. No. Toby, people pay thousands to play with me. You don't know what a deal you're getting. Besides, it's the only way to make me stop. She again indicated the chair. I just stared at her, fists clenched. Why? Because, Toby dear, our mother and father's beloved who can do no wrong. Because we never finished our game. Remember when we were little? We started to play, but things went too far. We couldn't end it. I won't be left at a stalemate. Finish the game with me, dearest Toby, golden child, the one Mom and Dad always loved best. They love you too. They love me like the alcoholic loves the bottle, a terrible influence they secretly wish they could obliterate. And it's true, I am terrible, but perfect. Good Toby. Win against me, and I will stop. Her eyebrows shot up. Reluctantly, dread building in my gut, I sat down opposite her. I threw out one more feeble argument. We don't have enough players. I won't let anyone else get involved. We don't need other players, she corrected. A duel game is a 2-player version. It has a few extra rules, like the double dare. It's where you take your opponent's challenge and double it. So, for instance, if it's, would you kill a kitten, and I accept, you'd have to kill too. Great example. How are your cats, by the way? All very well, as it happens. They haven't been drawn into any games. She flashed a wicked smile at me as one of said cats, oblivious to the danger it would be put in should Seti draw any cards that involved pets, came over and rubbed against her leg, purring. She explained the rules of the duel game as she shuffled. It was basically the same as the regular game, but answers were scored differently. 1 point for yes, 1 point for correct guesses, 0 points for no, 0 points for wrong guesses, 10 points for a completed challenge. If a challenge went unfulfilled, it was an automatic loss. If more than one challenge was fulfilled for the same reward, only the most recent challenge would gain the reward. The game would continue until each player had drawn 10 valid combinations. Getting points for saying yes automatically skews the game in your favor, I observed. It skews the game in favor of playing more boldly, yes, Seti agreed, but it's still possible for you to win. I glowered. Seti allowed me to draw first. Would you dance with rotting human entrails to earn a dream vacation? Tame by the current standards of the game. I started to put down my no card, but then remembered I'd get 0 points for it. Of course I put down yes. Seti would manage to make those rotting entrails appear, and I didn't even want to think about whether they'd really be human or not. I sighed and pushed forward yes. Seti also slid a card forward. Both of us flipped. Both of us said yes. 1 point for me, 1 for Seti for guessing correctly. I waited for the inevitable challenge, but she only smiled. You're not going to challenge? I asked. No, because you'll actually do it, and you'll get 10 points, she replied. And obviously, you'll get a dream vacation too, but I'd rather save my money for more interesting rewards. Seti's turn. She flipped the cards slowly. Would you fly to Stinky Toenails to gain your name on Mars? Invalid, obviously. She drew again. Would you sing loudly to the president to save world peace? Another invalid combination. SETI drew 3 more nonsense sentences before finally coming up with a valid combination. Would you kiss a bowl of diarrhea to get a year's supply of ice cream? Ugh, I said. This is such a dumb game. SETI smiled and pushed a card forward. I rolled my eyes and did the same. We both flipped. Yes. Of course you would, I said, disgusted. You could challenge, she offered, and give you 10 points. Screw that. We went back and forth a couple more rounds. My hands were shaking. Soon we got to challenges I wouldn't do. I started playing no. SETI always played yes. She was gaining points, and didn't challenge me on the rare times I drew something I felt I could do. And then, as we were approaching the 10th round, that would end the game. SETI drew a combination that made my breath catch. Would you skin yourself to win the game? SETI was already ahead. If I didn't challenge her, she'd win. If I challenged her and she refused, she'd lose. The smart play here would be to pick no. She wouldn't risk anything. She was way ahead of me anyway. The game would end on the next turn. All she had to do was miss 1 point by playing her no card. Playing yes was something only a complete idiot would do. But SETI had never played no, not in any of the turns we'd had so far. Would she now? SETI looked me in the eyes as she put down her card, smiled almost apologetically with a little shrug. Oh, how that smile infuriated me. The lightness of it, the willingness to throw everything down in this stupid, idiotic, foolish game. And she was already guaranteed to win. I played my card. We flipped them over. Yes. Fury coursed through me. It was like when we were kids all over again, and SETI would brazenly claim she'd do something outrageous, when all of us knew she really wouldn't. When she'd bluff, and I'd call her on it, and the words spat from my lips before I could think to stop it, because how dare she mock me like this, playing like her life hardly mattered. Challenge. It was strange. The expressions that flickered across SETI's face. Regret, fear, angst, rage. For just a moment she reminded me of that little girl again. The little girl who idolized me, who just wanted to be brave enough to impress me, until I called her out for going too far. And every single time she forced herself to rise to my challenge. Remembering that, I suddenly regretted my actions. SETI's eyelids closed, fluttering, as if she were coming to terms with what had just happened. Then without a word she rose to her feet. My parents did a lot of barbecuing in the summers, even the occasional pig roast or carving up venison. I wondered with horror if among the many implements in this grandly furnished house, they might have a skinning knife. SETI, wait, I cried, seizing her arm as she turned away. I forfeit. You hear me? I forfeit. You win. I withdraw my challenge. What? She stammered. You can't forfeit. That's not how it works. Too bad. I'm done. Toby, she shrieked as I grabbed my jacket and rushed for the door. You agreed to finish the game. Yeah, bite me. I ducked out and slammed the door. From inside, a howl of anguish. High, keening, practically inhuman. God, SETI could be so scary. I hurried away, trying to force the horrible, stupid game from my consciousness, trying to forget how irrational SETI could be. My phone buzzed. SETI sent 5 different messages, one containing 3 devil emojis. Another, we're not finished. We have 1 turn left. Toby, 1 turn. ending off a lot of them with exclamation marks. She carried on like that all night. I silenced my phone. In the morning, I had so many messages I blocked her. I fully expected calls from our parents, Jules, or our mutual acquaintances. Email, messenger, voicemails at work, maybe a single telegram. SETI had a huge network, and I knew my sister had 1,000 ways to contact me. There would be no escaping her wrath until the game was over. And yet, silence. Not so much as a peep. It was this complete absence of communication that unsettled me more than anything. I called our parents, Jules, friends, but they hadn't heard from SETI. Not wanting them to worry, I lied to everyone, and said I was just checking in because it had been a while. With every hour, the knot of dread in my gut tightened. Finally, 3 days after our fateful game, there came a knock at my door. I'd been in a state of suspension so long that my first feeling was relief. At last. We'd get this over with. I went to the door, calling out, "Who's there?" To no response. I peeked through the peephole, but it was covered. Sigh. Just like SETI to play games. Maybe it really was a singing telegram. I opened the door. "Hello?" The word died on my lips, shifting from hello to hell in what, looking back, seems chillingly appropriate. On the threshold stood a costumed figure. She was reminiscent of the Easter Bunny. Huge black eyes, plush fur around chipmunkish cheeks, buck teeth and mauve fur, with a fluffy white belly. This wasn't sophisticated like a cosplay persona. No. This was more the mall-grade Easter variety, vaguely creepy and unsettling, like a costumed theme park character or a Chuck E. Cheese animatronic. I'd always had a dread of such characters, even as a child. Something about the fakery of the costuming was so off-putting. Now that same unease prickled through me as the bunny spread its arms in a ta-da pose. I said. I stepped back and held open the door, trying to ignore the small voice that wondered what I might see if I lifted the mask off that bunny suit. The bunny strolled in with an exaggerated happy stride, reminding me, again, of a costumed character. Who could ever tell what was underneath such a suit? The bunny pulled out 2 chairs from my dining table and patted one for me. "SETI?" I said. The bunny pulled a card from a pocket somewhere in its fur and held it up for me to read. One more turn. "How do I know it's you? Take off that dumb thing." A head shake. The bunny pointed again to the card, exaggeratedly tapping it and nodding to me. Its suit smelled faintly of copper and maybe something else. Sweat. Body odor. No. It was more unpleasant than that, like the smell of a dead mouse I'd found once in a trap rotting for days. And I wondered, what was under that suit? She wouldn't have done it, would she? She couldn't have and survived. This had to be an act. To make me fret. Think that she'd done something crazy. I looked into those bunny eyes. Black mesh. I thought I could just glimpse the whites of her eyes. A faint gleam as she looked out at me. Again that coppery smell. And as we both sat at the coffee table there was, I could see, very clearly now, blood dripping from the suit of the bunny. A faint dribble of it. How badly was she bleeding in there? Or was it all an act? Would she even be bleeding still? Would blood really drip through the costume? God, SETI, fine. I'll play the last turn, and if I win, you'll take off that suit and you'll be just fine underneath. Alright? Deal? You'll be whole and fine. The bunny made a sound in the affirmative. It was SETI's voice, but sounded wrong. Like the vocal cords were somehow deteriorated. It reached into a pocket somewhere in the suit, handed me the would you cards. My turn. Hands shaking, I shuffled. I could see now a couple of places where the mauve fur was darker, wet with stains. But it can't be real, I thought. No way it can be real. I swallowed the bile in my throat and dealt the cards. Would you? My hands trembled as I turned each one. Disappear yourself to win this game. Disappear? Did that mean die and my life, or like witness protection disappear? The meaning was unclear, but I couldn't pick no, or said he would win. And somehow I knew what would happen if she won. That she would lift off her mask and underneath there would be... I pushed forward my card, and the bunny pushed forward hers. And we flipped. Yes. The bunny spoke. One word. I tried not to imagine its skinless tongue slurring. Challenge. My heart quickened. Fine, I said. You, Mom, Dad, Jules, everyone we know. You'll never see me again. The rest of my life, no matter how hard you look or how you spend your resources to come after me, I will not be found. I'll be gone, and when I am, I'll have won the game. As I spoke, I felt the air shiver between us. It was as if something had writ my words in my soul, and I knew, as deeply and suddenly, and surely as I knew my own name, that I would disappear so thoroughly, I would effectively cease to exist. Somehow, I was incredibly calm about all this. Goodbye, Seti. I turned and grabbed my bag and walked out. I drove to our parents' house to tell them that I loved them. They were extraordinarily perplexed when I greeted them each with a tight embrace, and even more so when I begged them to please look after Seti for me. I just hoped it was enough to save my sister. That whatever was under that suit was all part of the drama to draw me in, and everything would return to normal after the game. I just had to disappear. Who? Said Dad. He was a bit hard of hearing. Seti. September, I told him. What's happening in September? Asked Mom. No, Mom, I'm talking about Seti. I stopped, staring at the mantel. A few days ago, I'd been here playing with Seti, and the photos on the mantel had been the same vacation trips as always. Goofy images of Seti, me, and Jules playing as children. But now I was looking at the exact same photos, and it was only me and Jules. Mom, meanwhile, nudged Dad and murmured, Sweetie, remember how Toby used to pretend to have a little sister? Oh gosh, that's right. Dad brightened and turned to me. And whenever you did something bad, you'd blame it on September. But I was already out the door, rushing back to the game. I'd declared I would disappear. From the present moment on, I'd be gone, but Seti? I checked my phone, my email, messages. But there were no photographs, no texts, no social media evidence my sister had ever existed, present or past. I called Jules, but she said the same thing as our parents. That Seti was the imaginary little sister I made up to blame for the worst outcomes of a childhood game. A game I designed. A game for which I am the guarantor. A game / have been hosting among various groups and players for the past few years. And when I at last got home and rushed inside, the bunny was no longer at the table, but the cards were still laid out. A note scrawled beside them on a bloody napkin. Double dare. People still contact me asking why I ended the game. The truth is the napkin, the only proof of Seti, written in her own distinctive handwriting, disintegrated with time, and I'm not even sure myself what I believe anymore. But I'll tell you this, if anyone ever offers to play the would you game, no matter what the prize, do not do it. It's not worth it. Learn from my mistakes. And never, ever play the would you game.